I'm going to call to order the SHAPE Committee meeting of March 21st. And roll call.
Chair Smithers.
Here.
Vice Chair Chateau.
Here.
Committee Member Barr.
Here.
Caldwell.
Here.
Dell.
Here.
Feeney.
Yes.
Knight. Absent. Neiman. Absent. Park.
Here.
Salvestrin.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
So the first item would be to open up to public comment for anything that doesn't pertain to something that's on the agenda this evening. If anybody in the public wants to come up and have a word. Okay. I'll close public comment and move on to new business. We're going to discuss a few properties tonight, maybe more, depending on how we do. And I think Jean is going to moderate and help us and facilitate and move us through these properties. And I think we're going to start with the fire station first, if I remember, and then the library, and then the Railroad Avenue properties together. Okay?
So last week we did the two different groups. An idea has been floated to do one big group this week. Just wanted to check in and see if that's okay to try, or if you want to do the two groups.
I think one group will work for these.
Okay with that? Okay, great. So, okay. This could be a little trickier. So I want to just point some stuff out here. If you will allow me to help you out with this, and here's what I mean. Sometimes you can get carried away with your idea, your discussion about something, and it can go on quite a bit of time. We want to get through these 4 buildings this evening. Would it be all right if I just said I'm aware of the time? Would it be okay if you finished in a couple of sentences? You can say, no, I need more, but at least it's jogging you. Would that be all right? Would you allow me to do that? Okay.
Oh, no.
You know, I don't, well,
let's try it.
Let's try it and see if we're going to actually run into problems with people going on and on and on. I think Mark's pretty good at saying, yeah, we understand that, Oliver, but what if we do this? Or I understand that, Doug. You can
Now, why would you think that I pointed out with Oliver?
Well, you pointed it out with me half dozen times, too. So, I just think we can do this as adults. The ticking clock thing really is, we suffer that in city council meetings, and it's just awful for everybody, and everybody hates it. So why do that here if we really don't have to? Let's give it a try without.
I'm not suggesting that. I said nothing about keeping time on something, except that if somebody is going on, and here's the deal. Those of you that go on and on are the ones that are unaware of what it feels like to be waiting for somebody to get done. That's the problem. And so it would be a light touch, and again, it's not cutting you off, it's just saying I'm aware of the time if you could do that. We're going to try and capture the ideas while you're doing them so that when we're done with the building, we can go, okay, are these the ones you want to bring forward or not? So Roseanne's going to be writing some of that stuff, but not stopping you to write it. We'll just check with you when we're done with that building. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So the first one is the fire station.
And I'd be happy to go first because it's going to be very short. The square footage is 15,420. The appraisal is $5,400,000. The current year repairs are $50,000. So I would say that we need to just go ahead and fix the fire department. The only things that I might recommend would, if it comes to that, is we could build a second floor on the fire department and use it for the meetings that they have with the public or the fire department or whatever, and then maybe add on there for the police department. So that would give a little bit of room for the police department to be there too. So that's all I have for the fire department.
I would agree with those options, but I believe that compared to the value of the property, the cost of repairing it is so small that it doesn't need to be part of this group at all. It needs to be taken out of the general fund. And it seems to me that I heard somewhere when we toured that, in fact, there's already money budgeted for fixing the bay doors. And that's the most expensive part of the repairs in the fire department.
I'm in agreement with all of that. I think that makes absolute sense. Fix the doors and then move on. I think your idea about the combination and how this can all be worked out is part of that bigger picture of City Hall, and we had talked about it in the separate groups. So eventually, I think we're going to have to revisit that.
Any others?
Generally speaking, I guess in a general way to frame the fire station, I don't think there's a lot of alternatives at the fire station. I don't think anyone wants to move the fire station or replace the fire station. I think everybody's generally, the consensus is the fire station should stay where the fire station is, and we should, move forward with whatever the repair plan is. And if, we decide to place the police station adjacent to the fire station, that may make sense. That doesn't affect the fire station in and of itself.
Right.
So I think the fire station's kind of good to go the way it is.
Everybody else? So there's two, possibly adding a second story for the police, implementing fixes identified.
But I would like to see, Roseanne, right up there, my suggestion that it be taken out of the general fund.
Okay, and the implementing fixes identified. Okay.
Pat, just so I understand, the fire station isn't part of a separate fund, so I think any repairs and betterments and improvements of the fire station would come out of the general fund.
I thought we were looking at all these repairs and that we were going to lump them all together, the buildings that we decided to repair and not replace, and then somehow decide to finance them. And what I'm saying is that rather than include the fire department in that lump sum of assets for which we're going to need to have money to repair, that it should simply come out of the general fund because it's such a small amount.
I think it's fungible. Cash and financing is fungible, so you'd get to an operating plan for the city, and then you'd have capital improvements or replacements or new buildings, and you look and see what your cash position is, your cash flow position, and you'd have to decide how you're going to fund all that stuff, whether it's through bonds or a sales tax or other mechanisms of funding it. But it's all general fund expenditures or cash outflows that you're going to have to fund one way or the other. Yeah, I mean, if you can say fund it through the general fund, but then if funding a particular thing through the general fund creates a negative cash flow or negative fund balances, you can't fund it that way. So I think it's all just fungible cash flow.
No, I understand what you're saying, Mark, but what I'm saying is it's just about time for the new budget to be created. That's going to happen in the next month. And what I'm saying is that it could be put into the next budget.
So you're suggesting the fire department would be a priority over any other repairs and capital improvements?
No.
Well, you have to put a priority in the order of how you want to spend the cash.
You're making this so difficult. I'm suggesting that it be considered as part of the general operating budget as an expense. And I think that if it's done that way, the fire department's going to get fixed a lot faster than if it becomes part of the rest of this whole puzzle
Okay, so
that the mayor says we're wrestling with.
So your suggestion is you want it to be a priority over the other
I'm
capital
suggesting
improvement projects?
that it be considered as part of the city's budget. I don't know if it would be a priority because I don't know what the other things are in the budget, so I couldn't possibly answer that.
Okay. All right.
It could be added as It could be added as a Department of Public Works project. I think they've broken out projects year to year.
No, I know, you have to line item it. I mean, you're going to have the operating budget, and then you're going to have repairs, maintenance, and betterments, and if you're going to put this one first before any of the others, you have to prioritize it versus considering them all together, and then what the financial capabilities are of the city. So if you want to prioritize it, I just want to make sure we have what you're suggesting properly, written down, that you are trying to prioritize it above something that may happen with building a new city hall or something we may do at the library
Well, I'm
or
trying to
some of the other
separate it,
facilities.
not prioritize it.
Well,
I'm trying
okay.
to separate it out.
Okay, well, it will be part of the general fund. I mean, that's what it will be part of.
Chair Smithers and committee members, if it's helpful, something we are already planning in terms of the development budget for next year to double the capital investment that we're making toward our city facilities, given the other challenges with respect to the budget. And as you noticed in the long-range financial forecast, we're going to ramp that up, or intending to ramp that up over the next several years to help address that. And I would imagine a fix like this that we're describing would be funded through the operational side, whether we kick it to a CAP, the funding necessary, or incorporate it into an annual budget. But one of the challenges that I discussed today with Eric, our Public Works Director, is once we have some clarity from the committee on recommendations and the council discussion of these, we need to build a plan. We need to take that EMG study and build a plan that addresses the coming needs as well as the existing deficiencies. So we're only going to be able to take on so much with $100,000, knowing that if you X out City Hall from that entire equation, the capital requirements equate to about $685,000 a year for all of these other facilities. So we have a little ways to go, but it's a start to double that investment.
Are there any other different ideas for the fire station? So the two up there, let me just double check. One is to add a second story, possibly for police. The other one is to implement the fixes that are identified, and then one of the options under that is out of the general fund. Should it actually say out of the general fund in next year's budget?
That's fine.
I don't think Suzanne's suggestion was add a second story for the police department. Wasn't it just to move maybe the police department adjacent to the fire department and maybe potentially add a second floor for other
things, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So not specifically for the police department, just,
But it could be there.
yeah. It would have to be over the section that's not where the engine bays are. It would have to be, yeah.
Can I just ask for a little clarity there, too? I'm not quite sure. So the second story is because you think the fire department needs more room for fire department purposes?
I think what I said was the second story could be used for meetings for the fire department or public meetings like we had in the downstairs, and then that downstairs part, an add-on, could be the police department.
Police department, I
right.
see. Got it.
So the downstairs now, which they use for meetings, plus more, could be the police department.
Gotcha.
Right.
Can we just simplify it and say a combination of fire and police? I mean, getting into building program elements is a bit
That's fine with me.
premature.
Well, no, we're going to design this all out. And
Yeah, let's
we're going
do
to have
that.
the whole architectural
Let's
plan.
do
We're
that.
going to rely on you to come up with the engineering for the second floor. And
Happy to do it. Let's just keep it simple so we can get to the next one.
Fire station going once, going twice, going three times. Okay. Library.
I'm not going to go first on this one because mine's pretty lengthy, so I'll wait and hear what everybody else says.
anybody? Come on now.
I think
I'll go
that
ahead and
the-
say that I think the library is an iconic structure, and I think people have trouble separating the library from the building. So I would suggest that we just go ahead and do the fixes that are necessary on the library and leave it at that.
I agree with what Glenn said. I think the biggest thing that we want to make sure, there was some water damage, as I recall, from some of the roofing material, and it was a little unknown as to the origin and source of that. I think they've tried to fix it a few times, but that should be the priority, I think. If we can only do one thing to the building, that would be it, in my opinion.
And as I recall, the EMG analysis of that building missed the fact that the elevator didn't work. So I think, I don't know.
The elevator.
In the library or Carnegie Building?
The library elevator works now. They fixed it.
It just didn't work the day we were there.
It's off and on. Well, I'll go next because mine was really lengthy, but after what Glenn said, I concur. I have a whole list of things that happen at the library all the time, but I think the library should remain the library. There's room upstairs if we ever get to move out for 4 offices, 4 cubicles up there for offices that would be empty.
Can we hear your list?
Would you like to hear my list?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. What it's used for now, it has a huge children's library, which is in use all the time, and they have a little room where children can play, but it's also the story hour time. And in that area is also the teen room. And if you haven't been in there to see the teen room, you should go in there. It's absolutely fabulous. There's a Hispanic area, which is got chairs and tables, and there's people there all the time. There's a computer station with, I think there's maybe 3 tables with maybe 4 or so computers on it, and that's busy all the time. There's the wine library, which I don't see too many people in the wine library, but that's where the program area is, and that's where people go and read the newspapers and et cetera, et cetera. Then there's a gallery that goes to the back where the community room is, where meetings are held, board meetings are held, and the movies are held for people. Then there's the rare book section and the microfilm room, which you have to get a key for. Then there's the Behringer room, which holds meetings also. Small people go in there to do work. They have tutoring, people that come in there all the time. Then I mentioned the small community room. And then upstairs is the huge storage area where we have all of our things. Plus it's got 4 cubicles, which are nice office spaces. And then there's another big area where we do our collection work. And they do book binding, and they do book repairs, and they're busy there also. And then above the children's library, there's a huge, huge attic storage area that is full with everything that they do with the children's area and for other things. They have many programs, and they store all their things up there. So there's no unused space, and it's very busy. That's fine.
I'll throw in my short 2 cents. I agree that we should fix that building. It's an iconic building, much loved by everybody in the city, and by our criteria, more or less fully utilized for the public good. That's not to say there couldn't be other better uses in the future if, as Oliver was saying, libraries are going to shrink in the next 30 years while we're doing things because it's all online now and you're going to get fewer and fewer. But it's still a building that, if that is now sort of the cultural center of the city, and if we build more over there in that direction, then there's going to be room then for more cultural things in there and more things we can use for the city. So I'd say fix it and keep it for the moment and see what else we can do with other places as opposed to the library.
Suzanne, you obviously know a lot more about the library than I do. Although I was there today to pick up 3 books, so thank God it's there. Were you suggesting that the cubicles upstairs were space available for other uses, or because then you heard you say there's no unused space? So I just want to make sure of whether you're saying there's space there or not.
Well, there's 2 attics. There's one where the Historical Society is, that has 4 cubicles. The other attic, you can't get to from there. You have to go down another stairway by the children's library. And up there, it's another huge storage space. So that possibly could be used for something else if they kind of redesigned their storage area.
But it's really storage. It's not somewhere you would put staff.
Oh, no, I'm sure it would be usable.
Okay.
So take a little wander up there sometime.
We didn't see the children's room, but Suzanne, your office is up there now. It's being used for, not on the other side.
On the other side,
The
right.
attics are being used for,
Right.
could be remodeled to be better office spaces, but they're certainly usable. Yeah.
The one thing I'd like to add to that thought on the library is that there is extremely inadequate parking. And first of all, the lot they've got is not very efficient, but I think some parking needs to be added for the library. And I don't know where that property would be. I mean, the only one I can think of is Adams Street. I hate to see Adams Street, become asphalt, but somewhere there's going to need to be an accommodation for more parking for the library.
You mean in the future or now? You feel that you can't find a
Well,
parking place when you go there now?
I'd say that as whatever the plan is for Adams Street, and as parking, if there are things put on Adams Street as parking is considered, I think the library is going to need more parking, more space, and I just wanted to mention it, that I think that parking is an issue on that street. Library Avenue is typically just packed. Thank God I've got a disabled placard and I can park.
Yeah, I went
But
to
otherwise,
I went
it'd be
to
a long walk.
I agree with you, Glenn, because I went to a Federated Women's Board meeting there this morning that started at 10:30. I parked at West America Bank. I mean, I drove up and down the streets, both Adams and Library, and cursed the people who took 1.5 places when they could have parked in one. And I ended up parking in West America Bank, hoping I wouldn't get a ticket, which I didn't.
You didn't make a deposit?
I think I'm in the minority here, but I think the building was bastardized with the additions that were put on in the 90s. I think it's the layout is pretty horrendous. I think that of any building that the town has, it's timber frame construction, which means that augmenting it for other uses or combined uses is very economical. And I spent a fair amount of time in there too, and by and large, I think it's extremely uncomfortable. I think by library standards, it's very unfortunate that the books get priority of the perimeter and the people get the dark space in the middle. And I think that if it were laid out differently, we could gain a significant amount of square footage for other things.
So what's your suggestion?
My suggestion is that we put that on the list to consider that beyond just repairing the library, we can integrate it for other things that the city needs.
Do you have any thoughts about specifics on that?
No, not right now. Not that I'd like to share. I'd want to spend more time with it, but I think that just saying, hey, this is a building that's not falling down shouldn't be the precedent for, hey, let's just fix it. I mean, as far as building assets go, most of them are horrendous. And I think that as we start at the beginning of this, we should be ashamed. And I think that as far as civic buildings and examples of what we think about our community, the library is, yes, it's iconic by our local standards that it's a building that exists that's not in horrible disrepair, but it's not a great building, not by any stretch.
One of my thoughts on the library inside, too, was there's no reason why, after all these years, that it couldn't be redesigned on the inside to make it more welcoming and accommodating for your dark areas. There are a lot of dark areas, and it just takes someone to come in and say, hey, let's revamp the library and rearrange things and make it more visual to people.
I've seen both visions. I love the library. It was one of the places I just loved to go when I first moved here. I love the people in the library that work there and the programming and just having it be a community center, so I wouldn't want to give up any of that. So I, too, could see it when, Joshua, when you talked about the other space and building a beautiful space, and I see that vision. I think it could be beautiful. I think it could be even better. I think one of the best things is that setting and having it be in the vineyard and having the open space next to it. but I don't know if we have the money for it, so I don't know that piece. And the only way that I would want it to change is if we kept all of that programming and the things that go on and the librarians and all of that and had everybody on board to then create something new that was even better.
I would hope that this isn't a process we'll repeat every couple years as finances ebb and flow. I think that as we're talking about building assets, the conversation shouldn't just be, what do we have in our coffers right this second? We should be thinking far into the future so that we're dealing with our land assets in such a way that we're not just cutting out our potential of what we could be in the future by putting everything into little bits rather than thinking a little bit bigger.
I think that's a good point. We should be doing 40-year thinking here. If it's practical in the short term, we could do something, but at the same time, I think it's good thinking.
So I think I hear what you're saying, and what I think you're saying is don't necessarily change it and tear it down now, but certainly 10 years down the road, or even sooner, 5 or 6 or 7, we might want to consider building a new library.
Whether it's a new library or whether it's taking that parcel and getting it back to the original building and navigating the programs so that they're not stacked on top of each other but intertwined in a sophisticated way so that they're better used. Yes, I think that what I'm getting at is for built assets, we have more property and more buildings than we need. And if we can prioritize what are the functions of the city that need to be prioritized now and what can we do, we leave room for all the other things that we're also passionate about to do later. But we're taking care of the issues at hand that this committee was formed to handle to begin with. So I think that we need to prioritize and still keep other things in our peripheral as we're prioritizing.
So can I just ask you for clarity? So you're basically saying we should fix it now, but we should think of it in the bigger picture for the long run. There may be a time in the future when we'll reorganize everything that's going to happen on, maybe there'll be a great idea for what should happen on Adams Street, and that building can be part of it if it's reorganized later. We shouldn't dismiss that.
If there are life safety concerns, if it's health of our employees, that should be a no-brainer. Yes, fix it, for God's sakes. Get a schedule in place for yearly maintenance. I mean, I think Mark and the staff is on that, and they realize that it's something that's been kicked down the road up to this point. And that's why we're all sitting here, because nobody's prioritized staff positions to deal with built assets. That's not our purview. It's not our purview to say, hey, you should, replace the AC condenser at the fire station. It's our purview to talk about what are the assets that we have, how valuable are they being used appropriately? If not, what are some good alternatives? And I think we have a couple buildings that are absolutes. Fire station's one of them. Library is another one, but I think with the library we should keep it open for discussion on, as we get to these other buildings and functions, can it be better utilized and incorporated in such a way and not just what it is now?
So one thing I do believe part of our purview is to suggest to City Council for buildings we're not assuming wholesale changes to adopt the EMG schedule. So when you say don't do the AC, we shouldn't be talking about doing the AC at the fire department. If the AC on the fire department is part of the EMG plan, we should be suggesting to City Council that they ought to adopt that.
What I'm saying is I think that through natural selection, by the time we're done with this process, there's going to be a few buildings that, yes, we shouldn't be putting resources into. And there are a few that automatically fall onto the list of get this taken care of.
And I hear a lot of what you're saying, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I just want to, for the committee's what's requested of the city council for the committee, I just want to make sure that it's clear, at least to me, and where we're going to go. You're not suggesting at this time, or within the suggestions that the committee is going to propose to the city council, that we necessarily make any radical changes to the library building.
I don't think we can answer that until we're through the conversation of all the buildings.
Well, no, but that's what we're doing with every building. So the question is, do you think there's an alternative that needs to happen to the library? I mean, we just got done with the firehouse. Everybody says, leave the firehouse as it is, do what EMG says we're supposed to do. Potentially, there's an alternative that says maybe we look at adding a second story in areas where we can. So the question is do you have a suggestion that says we should tear down one or two wings of the library and do something else?
So to clarify, even with the fire station, I think it's appropriate that right now we have the discussion of it would make a lot of sense to combine the police station with the fire station if we can find a way that's viable. And that does not necessarily mean fire station adjacent to police station. It could be a combined program of both.
Okay, then this is what we need to hear from you.
And, yeah,
Joshua.
I'm happy to say that.
I know, but that alternative didn't come out when we were talking about the fire station. You didn't say we should look at an alternative should be combining them. So I really want to hear what you and everybody else has to say.
You can browbeat it out of me.
No, I'm not browbeating.
Fill it out
okay,
all
wait.
day.
You're the one that sent out the thing that says don't. If somebody criticizes something, that we're not supposed to the gut punch, right? Remember the gut punch email that you sent out?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I mean, now you're talking about the fire station and suggesting that you have another alternative. We need to hear what everybody has to say. Don't hold back. That's what we want to know. That's what the public wants to know.
I keep trying to talk right now. Yeah, with the fire station, that's what I was trying to elaborate on, is that it's not, when second story was mentioned, we shouldn't limit it to, hey, second story. We should say, if we combine fire and police, it opens up more opportunities for City Hall. I mean, right now, the paradigm of City Hall and police station combined as one, if we stick with that, we're limiting our options. It makes sense from a logistics standpoint that fire and police would be in the same location for a lot of reasons. It's my opinion. I think that with the library, the way that it's built, the rest of the buildings are all stick frame construction. The library is timber frame with stud infill, which means that the majority of the structure is a set metric, but everything else about it is loose. So as far as all these additions that have happened, what's happening in the dormer space up above, the gable attic space, there are opportunities to create a lot of new floor space and rearrange things that for the cost of fixing City Hall, the library building could be multifunctional and serve a better purpose with minimal capital input.
As a what?
You could put City Hall there and keep the library, for example. I think that...
Combine the two in one, you mean?
Combine the two in one easily. I think that as far as talking about options, I think that if I can put out the information that these are things that we should consider, then maybe through the discussion of the committee we can come up with some alternative functions for things. Right now I have some pretty specific opinions about what should go where, but as we're talking building to building, let's talk building to building, and I think we should have a bigger conversation after everybody has their ideas out.
Okay. So I guess what I guess I'm trying to get clarity and specificity. So is an alternative that you're suggesting for the library, and maybe I'm being too linear, is one of the alternatives you're suggesting for the library to combine City Hall or portions of City Hall with the library property and building through some changes and additions?
Yes.
Okay, so that we need to have that up there. I don't know if you have that alternative up there for the library property, but that's what I'm trying to get to, is the specifics. And then as it relates to the fire department, are you suggesting that the fire department building footprint stays as it is and we pull the police department into it and somehow build some holding cells within the existing footprint, or
No,
are you
I'm
suggesting
saying that
something
being
else?
that strategic at this point would be a folly, because without looking at it specifically, we couldn't make a commitment to that. What I'm saying is some level of combination of fire and police would make sense. You may be augmenting the building footprint, you may be adding a story. It's not, I'm in no position to say right now, hey, this is how the layout should happen.
This seems to be a bit of a factor of a couple of different things. This was part of the issue of why aren't we talking independently about all the plans you have. If you have a big picture and you can put this here, and this here, it would be useful to us. And it's also a factor of having separated into two groups last week, so we didn't hear what the other people had to say. We basically, in our group down there, had divorced the police station and moved it in several different ways closer to the fire station and making it part of the fire station. So I think there was, in fact, just consensus on that from the two groups, but we have no idea what the other group said. So I think we're running into trouble here in two different arenas, because it isn't, none of this is about one building. This is all about all of the buildings and what we're going to do to make them work. Some may be standing out by themselves stuck, but these are the kinds of thoughts that are useful, and it's hard to do this one by one by one. So if we can expand a little bit like that, that's useful, I think. It's really good.
Well, we still need to talk about each one. And
Well,
I don't
we're
think
doing that,
that-
obviously.
We are, and I don't think there's a way that we could, assemble everybody's ideas and we have one massive conversation about all the assets. So touching on each one and expressing our ideas, by the time we get to the end, there's a few that may stick. And we had talked about presenting different schemes, and I think that'll come into play.
So let me just double check.
I completely agree with that, but what we have to prevent is, once we've gone through all the buildings, and then we start to try and coalesce the ideas of the buildings and a few alternatives over the landscape of all the buildings, we can't have some wild card come out of left field that all of a sudden throws everything we've done over the last 7 weeks into disarray. So if somebody has an opinion or an idea on a building that is associated with some other, we have to express it. We can't hold back and then wait to drop it on the committee a few weeks from now. Right? I mean, that's fair, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also think that it would be a good idea to have the summary of the criteria on a board somewhere where we all look at it, because we did it, but now we're forgetting it. And we're talking about buildings and their functions, and we're not talking about the values and the criteria that we established and that I think are important in the city. I'm not too sure we're considering that.
I'm with you. I think we've spent a lot of time on that criteria, and the whole point was to judge each of these ideas against the criteria and see if it fits, see how well they fit, and that helps us understand whether this is a good choice or a bad choice. So I think it's a great idea to have them posted and kind of consider them as we're thinking about these different ideas.
I don't mean to get us in the weeds here. I'm not saying we're on a bad.
No. I think it's great to have heard your idea. It's good.
So let me just recap. We just added to the fire options just a combination of police and fire without the second story, just as a open one of the options. In the library, and let me see if we've got these. One is just implement the repairs. Another one is to use the second floor for offices when they're available. That's a possibility. Redesign the interior. Add parking is another one, and then integrate with city uses such as City Hall through changes or additions. Do we capture all of the ideas presented so far? No. What are we missing? I just wanted to make sure that we got the ones presented so far. Okay, I'm not saying we're over with this. Yeah. You're up.
You got to jump in. If you don't jump in, you're not going to be heard.
The library is like a hot potato for me. It's very difficult to talk about the library because if you start to mention any possible changes, you get a reaction, which is, you're attacking the library, you're attacking culture, you're attacking Spanish reading classes, you're attacking children's rooms, you're attacking the Lego room. And so I just want everybody to just relax for a second and let me speak my piece when I talk about the library, that I'm not attacking the library if I'm recommending to build a new library. Because I think the library is a piece of a bigger cultural component. And the library is trying to expand itself as a community cultural center. If you look at the itinerary, they're bringing in music, flamingo dancing, and symphonies and things like this. And this is beckoning the right space to accommodate those kind of functions. I've talked to the library staff, and they say we hate it when we have flamingo and symphony music here because we're told not to talk. So you have a contradiction of functions in this building because it's not really designed properly for this expanded use. You have to imagine at one time the Carnegie building everybody was so excited when they built that. They got $7,500 from Carnegie. They built it, and they finally got out of the Oddfellows building, and they said, this is great. We finally have a place where we have a library, and this was a big step up. Then suddenly something happened where it's just not serving our needs because times changed. We need another space. We have other ideas. We got more money. We can bring more books. We want to do more things. And so there was this big drive to build this library somewhere else because they couldn't redo the Carnegie building. I'm sure there was discussions of maybe we could add a wing or a third floor or something. It's the same with the Pope Street Bridge, which is, at one time people were talking about the Pope Street Bridge, and it was like, well, it's very charming. We can't change it. And some people thought, keep it really tight and small, and we'll keep the visitors out. I mean, there was all kinds of thought process. And look what we have. We have a very dangerous, crazy little bridge with a lot of emotional connection to it. It's a sacred cow, and it doesn't fit the modern world. So I look at the libraries, though, there's a modern world out there that we got to remember. We have a next generation coming through the ranks, and their needs of a library is a little bit different than what we kind of remember. And I think that the library, because it wants to be tied into a big cultural center, there's always this feeling like, well, there's always Adams. We're going to move into Adams. Well, we've been down this road 1,000 times with Adams about building this big metropolis, and there's always this feeling like, well, we're just going to add a little bit more onto the library and just slowly step our way out. But when I look at solving problems in this town, I try to think of two things. One is I don't have a blank check, so I'm not going to live in a fantasy where I'm just going to come up to money and make all this thing perfect for me. I live in the reality that I got a limited amount of money, and what am I going to do to solve this problem? And the second thing that I try to keep in mind is I'm not going to imagine buying other parcels and doing all these imaginative things that's out of my control, which is buying the Bank of America building or grabbing this. I'm going to work with what I got, which is the City Hall site, the fire department, teen center, blah, 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 and then to try to think what's the best way to work with it, and to take Adams off the table, because Adams is a complicated problem because of its ability to entitle that problem and be a future revenue center that could be very critical in 10, 20 years from now. To encumber that with more civic things is to take that potential revenue source that could be so critical for the city off the table. Once you start building on it, it's gone. And so I think, if I had to deal with what I got, my preference is to build a beautiful new library complex with the cultural elements that it needs, big rooms, auditoriums, and add music, add culture, add crafts, add creative arts, you name it, all connected together with the library at Lyman Park. Because the problem with the library, it doesn't have an acre of botanical zone next to it. It doesn't have a park by which some of its functions could go into the park. If you go to other libraries that have parks, like in Windsor or in Los Gatos, they have a lot of children's programs that go into the park. They do painting, they do drawing, they do dance, they incorporate this park. There's no park at the library. When I go to the library, the signs say no eating and no drinking. There's no existence outside of that library. And so If you rebuild the library at City Hall, you have this beautiful acre of park that you can incorporate into the library functions. You can put 20,000 square feet of building, beautifully done at the City Hall site, integrated in the park, and then it would be a one-stop, cultural stop for library, music, learning center, because the library is in a lot of ways a learning center, but it needs to expand itself into technology. We need to bring an optical cable into the new library to have high-speed internet. The internet is really the library in some ways. It's great to have some books, but it can't be a monstrous 17,000 square foot book depository. That's just an ossified program. And so the reason that I think it would be better also to move the library is because I don't think there's a lot of enthusiasm to spend $10+ million on the City Hall when it can simply go into the library, and then we can spend that money on a new futuristic library and cultural center. I'd rather spend the money on that, which serves more of the community than just the small civic offices. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
So, to, I guess, try to get some clarity on what you said, which I understand a lot of what you're talking about. I think we also heard a lot of that last week. So, as it relates to the city, the library, you're suggesting move the library to the City Hall property. Is that the alternative that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
It's to build a new library, a better library.
On City Hall, in combination with something else on the City Hall property today.
Well, a big cultural center that ties it all together.
But that's what you're saying. You're saying move the library to the City Hall property in combination with what you spoke about last week, which was a cultural center.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And then you don't have to spend another $10 million in building a City Hall.
Switching them.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I mean, last week he said, have a cultural center on City Hall property, move City Hall library. Now we're talking about the library, so I just want to make sure that what you're just saying that the flip side of it is move the library to the City Hall property as part of your cultural center.
But see, the things, I've been to some other libraries, and I asked what goes on here, and when I found out there were libraries out there that offer free tutoring for every child in the public schools, I went, whoa. That's amazing. They have small rooms, they bring in volunteers, and the whole idea of offering free tutoring for all the kids in public schools. Now this is the kind of like serving the community, because I've been reading on the internet the biggest problem, the challenge of libraries, because libraries are very defensive and they try to fortify themselves like this is the way it's always been and don't touch it. Where there's this counter argument, which is get the library to serve the community more, which is a whole other approach.
I hear what you're saying, and I think your example that we spoke about the other day was Windsor, but what you have to recognize is our school district is different than Windsor's school district, and we're getting into a different discussion here about what the school district should or shouldn't do. I don't know that the library in the city is responsible for tutoring kids, and Windsor did something different. But, I mean, our school district has about $18,000 per student versus Windsor School District has $7,000 per student. So that's why maybe the city of Windsor has taken on the tutoring of the kids because they don't have the money for it. Our school district could tutor every single kid because they have piles of money. They've just decided to spend it different ways. So I don't know that, I mean, we're getting into the operational aspects of what the city ought to be doing versus the facilities that we're supposed to, which is our mission from the city council is what do we do with these facilities. The operational discussion, the city council is going to have to deal with that on a different level with a different committee or group or whatnot.
Well, I think you're missing the point. I'm making an analogy of community function, community services. I think a library that's got a tech department with 3D printing would be so critical for our teenagers. 3D printing is a big future. They're talking about building affordable houses out of 3D printers.
But that's an operational issue.
Right, I know, but you have to have to have the facilities.
But that's a choice of the city if they want to, if operationally they want to put that equipment in there and that's part of the programming that they want to do with the library. We're talking about the facilities. What do we want to do with the facilities?
Well, I'm just making the argument of building a new library would be such an uptick for the community.
Okay.
Because I think
I get it.
I think the whole idea that you can't just simply stick machinery into a building, it doesn't quite work that way.
I think one of the things that we're supposed to be looking at here is the cost of what we want to do with the assets. I certainly understand the value of what you're proposing, but two things we'd have to look at. First of all, it's not a simple thing just to move City Hall into the library. You're going to have to make offices. You're going to have to make the library into City Hall. So you're going to have to look at the cost of remodeling that building to make it into a City Hall. And secondly, you're going to have to look at the cost of building that library. So I think that's a consideration for this plan.
Well, the thing is that the 2008 Adams Street vision was talking about big library expansion, museums. There was a lot of cultural elements, and so my thought is take those and go somewhere that you can actually get this job done.
Yeah, but we all have admitted, and sadly enough, that the 2009 visioning process didn't talk about how we're going to raise the money to do what was in the visioning process. So, I still think my comments about needing to, if we consider your plan, we need to reconsider what it would cost to make the library into City Hall. And Glenn, you're absolutely right. It would require some more parking in that area, for sure.
This would also put another big piece of staff and books and so forth in play as far as moving parts. What I was thinking is that you not only are moving City Hall and you have to find a place to stash these people while you build a building or renovate a building or whatever, but if you're also at the same time moving the library, that seems to me to now really create it at least doubles the problem. I was taken by Joshua's idea that at least we should look at renovating the inside of the library, and I agree also with Oliver that there are things the library has taken on, and for good reason, that don't necessarily have to be done in the library. So if we do a community center, cultural center, there may be some things that logically migrate out of the library. Movies as an example, or dance or things, but it just seems to me we'd be putting an awful lot of stuff in play at one time. And either that, or we stage it out over 3 to 5 years or something like that. And I don't know that we. How many buildings are going to fall down in 3 to 5 years?
The logistics behind doing any one of these things is significant, but I don't think that should be a deterrent from coming up with a.
We're just going to move them into the fire department for a while until we
Sounds good.
build whatever we need to build. I do want to, there's a point, Oliver, you may feel I'm being a little bit maybe overly critical, but I have heard this from you several times actually at the committee level here, and it's this issue that we need to save Adams Street for the revenue-producing possibilities that it may have. And I think we've heard from the citizens since, I don't know, the 15 or 16 years that or maybe longer, that we've owned Adams Street. I mean, we originally bought Adams Street because nobody wanted, a big mall and Safeway and expansion to be built there. I think we've heard from the citizens that they don't want a big hotel built there, that it creates its own traffic issues as well as a whole host of other things. And I think it's a little bit of a false argument that we need to save that thing for future revenue needs. I don't know if you've looked at the long-term, financial forecast, but the long-term financial forecast looks pretty good. And can finance a lot of the things that we're talking about and debating here. And we've also got other possibilities. We've got other locations around town where I think the hotel concept, which is usually the Adams Street fallback on what's the revenue producing aspect of Adams Street. I mean, we've got potential south of town. There's at least a couple of them, and potentially, depending on what we're talking about next, we may have another potential. So I think it's a little bit of a false argument or a straw man argument even, to say that we need to save Adams Street and do nothing to Adams Street because we need the revenue producing. That's my personal opinion. I think if you look at the long-range financial forecast and consider some of the other options we have, I think we should be doing what I've heard from both when we did the principles and values exercise and from what people said in the 2009 visioning statement, and then what came out of what folks said when hotels were proposed a few years ago on Adams Street. That's not what this town wants, and we have to be listening to them.
It seems to me that we might be able to combine Oliver's idea and what we had been talking about before. If, in fact, you want to use Adams Street for ways to both help the community, which is one of the things that's the main criteria, is that whatever we do should be for the good of the community, either through community services or cultural services or whatever. It seems to me that if we use the library, as you're saying, use the library for what it is, expand it, change it, make it more contemporary in every way you're talking about there, and add the cultural aspects on that property where we have 5.5 acres, you're not giving up the opportunity to bring more revenue to the city if the cultural thing that we put on that property generates revenue for the city, because the events that we put into those spaces are things that are going to bring the kind of tourists to this town that stay for a week to watch it, or even a month in some cases if it's a teaching school, which I keep saying over and over, the Aspen Institute, Aspen Music Festival. That's a way to have both culture that's going to be good for every little kid in town and every senior in town, and it's also a way to generate revenue through tourism in this town, but it's the kind of tourism that stays more than 3 wineries. I'm going back to San Francisco on day trips. So if we're wise about how we use this, we can do both of those things. The library gets to be more contemporary. We eventually, I'm not saying do this all right now, but if that space is used for some of the things that were in the visioning thing from 2009, which is a cultural space where you can have TED Talks and you can have think tanks come and spend a week here, where you can have a Philharmonic Orchestra play, where you can have a lawn that people can sit out and watch
Festival?
and then you can turn back. A Shakespeare Festival is exactly.
And we will talk about Adams Street.
Then you turn around and you look and you do the thing that was proposed in 2009, which was an amphitheater. So I think we can do all of this there, and it would be very hard to squeeze all that into Lyman.
But I don't want to lose sight, so Oliver's alternative is to move the library.
Yeah, it should be on the board.
Which is on the board.
I just want to say, first of all, Joshua, thanks for bringing up the construction of the library and how to think about it differently, because I hadn't thought about that at all. My purview was much like Anna had said, hey, I bring my kids there, we have a good time, it has a nice setting out there. The parking is not great, but it is what it is. And from last week's discussion, Doug, your comment about taking City Hall and orienting it to Lyman Park, to me meant a lot, because it was something, a civic building we could have on Main Street that gave us some sense of pride to be here as part of St. Helena. But the idea of swapping City Hall and the library is compelling. I mean, to have that setting for the library and make that something right there that's front and center on our Main Street, and giving us a larger building to work with that's more malleable than the current building we're in would probably be, to Pat's point about the money, a cost-saving endeavor. I mean, I think if you run the numbers on taking City Hall and not having to build that versus building the library, you might find yourself ahead of the game. You'll also have a bigger building, which could add to some more flexibility for other offices or things to be in there. And in terms of Adams Street being a revenue producer, maybe yes, maybe no, but it's a piece of dirt that we effectively own, and I don't think we should give it up. We should either, improve it so it serves our needs as a community better, or let it sit there for a while. I think that we have a stronger. When I came into this committee, I wasn't a big believer in our fiscal situation where we're at, and having looked at a lot of the numbers and understood those a little bit better, I think that we have the potential, provided we take some other measures, to make this town better and to make it stronger financially. But I think that right now, as we're looking at the library and we're looking at City Hall, let's think about that, because that could be really cool for town. It could be great, and we're going to have to fix City Hall, right? There's going to be a big number associated with that at some point in time. So why not take a building we have right now and make that work?
So what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that the idea of moving City Hall to the library and building a library at City Hall in a long-range vision, not in the next 24 months, but in a longer-range vision, I think would be a benefit to both their uses. I think the library would benefit by bringing next to the park with some cultural elements.
So your alternative is the same, I just want to make sure it's the same as Oliver's, which is suggesting moving the library to the City Hall property and putting as in concept with a larger cultural center piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
I think we're going to have to deal with City Hall in the next 24 months.
Right. Well,
I do believe we can't, City Hall something has to happen.
But if that's the case, then maybe we could do something where we contract the library to a portion of it or repurpose a certain elements of it to the teen center or the CDF building or the Carnegie building. And maybe there's a round robin where we move the library, portions of it to the Carnegie building, take the classes from the Carnegie building, put it at the CDF building, and then take the City Hall and move it to the library. And we kind of do a swap. I think that if
do you have a transportation agency? That's just what I want to know. If you have a transportation agency, move all this stuff around.
But I think that if we're going to be talking about where these things end up, 10 years from now, I think that the idea of having that property at Adams Street to expand on or do something wonderful with is great. And then we could also take, that the city offices need 10,000 square feet. The library is 17,000 square feet. Now maybe we don't need to build a police station. I mean, I don't know that it's. I know fire and police are both safety elements, but I don't know that it's imperative that they need to be adjacent to one another. There are a lot of standalone police departments and fire departments that don't share a wall, and if we can take everything we have at City Hall and move it to a building that already exists, that might be a good way to do it. I mean, I hadn't, my first thought was fix the roof and let's go talk about the next building, but I think there's some merit to it.
I'm just surprised because Jeff and I never talked about this. So I'm stunned. I'm glad I'm not alone. But I just wanted to say one thing about synergy, which is parks go with culture, parks go with libraries, parks go with people. Parks don't go with offices and city halls. They just don't go together. And Lyman Park is the most underutilized park you can imagine. It's a whole acre of land, and it has no relationship with the police department and City Hall. And then on the weekends, they're both closed, those buildings. People go to City Hall for what? To get a building permit. It's not like they have, courtrooms. It's not a full-blown City Hall. And so it just seems like that whole acre of land, if you had to reproduce it, you would have to take a whole acre of atoms out of the equation just to compensate the same amount of park back to the library.
Which is what people have said they want on Adams Street. Open space in the parks.
You have
a library and you have the library park next door.
I just want to say one thing, and that is, I don't think it's correct to speak on behalf of 5,000 people. I think that you might know a lot of people have a certain disposition about Adams or this or that, but you can't come out and say that everybody agrees with me or I speak for everybody. I just don't feel that way. I've known so many people in this town, they all have different opinions about all these properties and what to do with them, and it's all over the board. And I don't really know where the majority is. And if you put it to a referendum, you would probably find out, but everybody's always speaking in behalf of everybody in St. Helena feels this way. I just don't think that that's the correct way to endorse an opinion. I
completely agree. Pat, if I can, I think that was directed.
I don't think you're saying that. I think that you and I attended the same meetings, and we heard the same thing in meetings. But I don't think you're saying that everyone in St. Helena agrees with you. You're saying what you heard in meetings, and I'm saying what I heard. And what I also wanted to say is that I envision the Adams Street property one day looking like a park.
I have to agree with that, and there is one practical aspect that I keep bringing up as well, that a cultural center is a place that you're having concerts, philharmonics, dances, TED Talks, and speeches. If that's what you're doing, a fire station next door with sirens going off in the middle of them will make it impossible to attract that kind of talent.
Can I check out?
We're gonna get to Adams Street probably at the very end of this thing, and so we're really gonna have a whole week-long discussion on Adams Street. And we obviously have a few differences of opinion as it relates to some of these items, but I think if there aren't any more opinions on the library and what the alternatives are for the library, we probably ought to move on to CDF and Teen Center / Railroad Avenues.
Can I jump in with that and start?
Can I just double check and see if there's anything we want to take off of the library before we move forward? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ideas there.
Do you want 7 ideas on library? Wait, I thought we had like 2, which was the library. Well, 3 maybe. I mean, it was a library. Consider, there are some potentials for maybe using the structure for some other offices, and then the third alternative was to move it to City Hall. How did we get to 7?
Parking, simply implementing the repairs.
Parking was just a comment that we could do, but it wasn't like tear down a wing of City Hall and build parking.
Would it be okay if some of the other committee members weighed in on this? That's what I'm asking. I mean, they're up there, and if they need to be taken down, or combine them. It's just unwieldy. So one of the things is simply implementing the repairs. Another one is redesigning the interior. Then there's adding parking. There's repurposing for a city hall. And then there's the big ideas, or use the second floor for offices when available. Those are kind of the smaller bits. One is build a new library on City Hall property with the cultural center integrating Lyman Park. And then the other one is integrating with other city uses such as City Hall through changes or additions.
I don't know, I think you could take away add parking, that's a given.
And you could combine a few of those first 2 or 3. It seems like that's one remodeling, do these remodeling efforts, and it's kind of remodels the library, interiors and spaces.
So implement the repairs and redesign?
That seems to take care of some of the first things you were talking about.
You could probably take off those 4 offices I mentioned upstairs. We're just, that's what's there now.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't need to put that.
Okay. And that kind of fits with redesigning the interior, right?
City Hall to the library.
Okay. And then the other 2, at least one of the other ideas came up in the City Hall. So it's already in your mix, right? In fact, both of them. I think building a new library on City Hall property or moving City Hall over to the library. So, but they're fleshed out maybe a little bit more. So, okay, I just want to make sure we're not moving ahead with stuff you don't want to move ahead with.
Yeah, that's number 2 from last week.
Yeah. Okay.
So a thought that I have for the CDF and the Teen Center would be to combine them. I think we have an opportunity, if we get lucky and if it works out, that we could take advantage of as a city, as opposed to selling it or leasing it and putting out an RFP and see what else could be on that property. It's the property across the tracks from that is owned by the Napa Valley Train, which is owned by the Nobles Hotel Group. They've wanted, for as long as I've lived here, 22 years, wanted to drop people off here, and there was never an advantage to the city for that. You drop those people here, they're there for an hour, and they use the toilets in town that we have to build for them, and they fill up the stuff, and they don't buy anything, put it on the train and take it. So we've never allowed them to do that, but I know they've wanted to do that forever. I've heard rumblings that because they're a hotel company, they'd love to put in a small hotel so that then they could have a package tour. You could come up on the train, you could stay for 4 days in our hotel, we'll have limos there, you can do your wine tasting, you'll come back and be in St. Helena, and it would theoretically bring a lot of 3 or 4 day or long weekend tourism here that would then show up at Oliver's Gallery and show up at restaurants in town, because there would be a captive audience to our town. Yeah, it sounds good already, and they've wanted to do it forever. We haven't allowed them to do that, so that lets them expand their business. It would put them into the business they're already in here, which they think they may want to do, which is a small hotel, and if we tell them to make it whatever we want, which would be like the train station is there, and make it the station hotel a la Europe, they could have an elegant small 30-room hotel there, and there's parking for that, and they own both sides of the tracks, and I don't know exactly what would go in there otherwise, because a train goes through the middle of whatever it is that you're going to put in there. So it seems to me that this would be an opportunity for the city to approach the people who own the train, see if they had any interest in this, and then we'd have some control of how it would end up looking and being, and it would add a little more TOT as well, but that's not really the point of it. The point of it is that it would hopefully give us enough money to pay for a new city hall, or at least a portion of it, or give us a lease that could help us pay the payments to issue a muni, a bond, or somehow finance this and then have enough payments from a lease if we were going to lease it. It seems to me it's worthy of exploration.
I kind of go along with Doug on that. However, for the teen center part, not the property, but for the teen center itself to be located somewhere else, I think we need to have someone volunteer to do a comprehensive report on the teens that might like to use a facility like that, what their age groups might be, what their areas of interest might be, and what the best location for that building would be. So I think we really need to see if the teens really need or want a teen center first before we think about fixing anything up for them.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation last week. I went to this St. Helena Chamber of Commerce Awards luncheon at Hall Winery, where Suzanne was honored as a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I had the opportunity because Mark Prestwich, our city manager, introduced me to Tony. I can't hear you from there. The man who's the head of the Boys and Girls Club. First of all, I said, "Do you have a room in there for teens?" And he said, "Yes." But he didn't carry it any further than that. He said that, and I get mixed up about the schools, understand, because I don't have kids or grandkids, but I think he's talking about the school in Adams. Is that the middle school?
Elementary.
That's the elementary school. They have already devoted a room for the teens to use as a teen center. And he said there are 16 kids coming there. So what I heard about our present teen center is that we only had around 6 or 9 or something like that. But he said they have 16 children and teens, whatever. And right now all they have are some couches and stuff. And what he would like to see is a modular. And I'm going to jump ahead here just a little bit. I think Parks and Rec should go to the Head Start building. And Jeff, you're the one that pointed out that there's room on the other side of the Head Start building to expand it, or even to put a modular. A modular would be very cheap to build, and maybe we don't want to fool around with that kind of construction. Maybe we want to do something that's more long-lasting. I don't know. But I think there's room on that property, and he seemed to think that spot would be very good for teens.
I had the same thought.
He's the Boys and Girls Club guy, right?
Microphone, please.
What?
The Boys and Girls Club guy thought that would be a good location
Yes.
for the teen things.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I thought the teen and the rec offices should go over to that building site and make it better for the camp or the summer, but obviously use it for more time during the year. I think the skate park is right there. I know before it was brought up that it was too far from the middle school, but I think that they can handle that.
Well, kids ride bicycles, right?
Right, exactly. And get rides and different things from parents. But the Boys and Girls Club does have teens going there, and some of them like to go there because their younger siblings are there. I think what we heard is they really liked the city staff person, Amalia, that was her name.
So
maybe there's a way to
give them
partner.
Amalia.
I don't know. But what my thought too was just bring them over to that Head Start building, put in the bowling alley. Somebody really wanted a bowling alley for the community.
Esther wants a bowling alley.
That's right. But yeah, have those two functions over there and put things over there so that it's lively and being used all year long, and it's a great facility.
It may be helpful for the committee to have a little additional overview of what's happening at what we're referring to today as the teen center is really our recreation department offices, and there's some programming space in the back. And we've really, in really recent months, made some adjustments to the activities within the building. And tonight we have Andre Pitchley, our Recreation Director, in the audience. And if it's okay with the committee, perhaps he can provide you a little overview of where the department has been and sort of where they're headed as well. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, Andre Pitchley, Recreation Director. So, a lot of things have been happening since I got here in July. I was over at the Carnegie Building beginning in July, and then in October, the end of October, we hired a second recreation supervisor. So now we have Amalia Kozicki, who's been with the department for about 5 years, and we have Stephanie Akabachi, who's our new recreation supervisor. Because there were 3 staff, I didn't want us to be located in 2 or even 3 locations. So I moved out of the Carnegie Building, moved into what was at the time the Teen Center, and started setting up shop there for our entire department to work. And we've spent time on the inside of the building cleaning out all of the obsolete equipment and supplies, and we carted off, I think, 20 yards worth of just broken stuff and stuff that was obsolete and stuff that was dirty, and it wasn't in the best of shape, especially for a place where you're going to have kids, teens, hanging out and participating in activities. To Pat's point, we met with Trent over at the Boys and Girls Club about 2 weeks ago now, and he reported that the teen program started the school year at 30, and now they're up to 40 kids using that classroom on the St. Helena Elementary School campus. And we were wondering if we were seeing our program numbers decrease because his program numbers are increasing. Amalia, who was in charge of the teen program, contacted some of those teens, and none of the ones who stopped showing up indicated that they were going to the Boys and Girls Club. They're just either going to the library teen room or they're doing something else. The numbers that the Boys and Girls Club is starting to experience in regards to an increase is just they've got a good program. They've got a great, it helps when you've got a classroom that's next to a Boys and Girls Club that has a gymnasium and an activity room, and if you've been in that facility, it's pretty impressive. Our building just couldn't compete, but as far as becoming an office for our staff, for the 3 of us, it really serves a good purpose as it is right now. And we're hoping to continue to grow programming in a variety of ways, not just in teens, but also with serving youth and adult programs and sports. The teen drop-in after-school program has phased out simply because we were now down to about an average of 2, maybe 3 days a week. And I would have 2 part-time staff showing up 5 days a week to be there to provide supervision, and it was simply we were wasting resources by doing that. What we have done in the back where the game room was is we've turned that into just a big open space where we can have activities like karate and other martial arts and American Ninja Warrior, and we're planning on doing some other classes for the Latino community where we can bring them in, and there'll be Spanish spoken classes like yoga and all these various things in this activity space where we're starting to see our numbers increase. So we're beginning to serve a greater number of residents and their kids with these programs. We're calling that room now, we're calling it the Redwood Room. So we're trying to create a little space there, a little in that area where it functions as both a recreation office and a recreation center. And we're going to work with what we've got. Any questions?
Yeah, so the teen program, so at your offices, that's the 3 of you are in that office,
Yes.
and then the teen program there is, you're saying that's more or less diminished now,
That
just
is
in that back space.
Yeah, we phased out of that. What we've done is the programs that we have now in the Redwood Room, the martial arts and those programs, is we've told any teens that were still wanting to show up, you can participate in these programs, and we're waiving the fee. You can still do that through the end of the school year.
These are middle schoolers?
Middle schoolers, yeah.
So, and they're the same ones that are middle schoolers are the ones that are showing up over
Yeah.
there. So it seems to me that if those are combined and your offices were in this brand new city hall that we're theoretically going to put together someplace, then that would empty that space out and it'd be available for another use that might be better.
Sure. And I'm, as a Parks and Recreation professional who's been doing this for almost 30 years, I could tell you there's a lot to be said for creating spaces, indoor facilities for Parks and Recreation purposes like recreation centers and community centers.
Do you guys do anything in the Carnegie Building? If that became a real community center, if that's what we turn that into, is that a space that you could use along with the yoga class? Because it seems to be completely underutilized now, and it's not really set up for anything. But if it were, would that be a space? It's close to the middle school.
We have programming in the Carnegie Building about 4 days a week.
Oh, so that's
So we've
good.
got morning classes, yoga. We've had some afternoon programming. It's a rental facility, so it's probably, and we're getting a lot of requests for rentals. So
that's good,
I'd say
too.
it's about 5 days out of the week we've got something going on in that building.
That's fantastic. So is there enough space in that building to have the programs there? If you've had fewer rentals and used the space better, say, could you put in the Boy Scouts? They meet once a week, and the Cub Scouts, and they don't have Cub Scouts, so it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. Could they fit in there too? Could we combine some of these things into what would normally in most towns be called a community center, where you would do all of those sorts of things?
It could function that way, but it would have to, there'd be a limit on how many people could fit into those.
It would be a scheduling issue,
spaces.
though,
Yeah,
right?
scheduling issues.
Scheduling.
Sorry, what space are you talking about, Doug?
The Carnegie Building.
Yeah, there's if for those of you who remember, when you walk in the front doors, you've got the great room on the right.
Right.
You've got and our Redwood room over at the rec department office is larger. I mean, so it's already a small space there. The meeting room on the left, there's really no way to close that up for any sort of activities, and then the dance room on the top floor. I mean, it's good space, and I'll take what we can get.
Well, it could be remodeled into something that you could guide the city into doing, theoretically.
Sure.
Just theoretically.
But when you're talking about a community center, and I've had experience with running a 36,000 square foot recreation center and a 21,000 square foot community center.
Right.
I mean, those are the type of spaces that get a lot of use, and the variety of things you can do in those spaces is what you're looking for.
Right.
So since you said you would take what you could get,
Mm-hmm.
would you take the Head Start building, and especially if there were the promise in the future of an additional building being built next to it?
Well, that's a tough one. Can we knock that building down first?
Can we what?
Could we knock it down first? It's a cinder block or an adobe building.
Well,
And yes, I will take what I can get for additional program space. As far as an office, for it to function in an office, we could do anything. If Mark said you're moving over there, it would be, yes, sir. How soon do you want me to move over there? We would make the best of it.
It's where your programs are.
Yeah,
where a lot of them are.
But it has problems in that inside the restrooms are not ADA accessible. So you'd be looking at some costs in getting it up to.
Sure.
The type of standards that it's just an office, it works. We could do that. But
I think it's $104,000, it says over here, to put the new roof on and upgrade the bathrooms.
yeah,
that are
it's
there, but not
and
ADA standards.
to have a facility located in a park is always desirable for Parks and Recreation Department. But
Make it the proper facility. I mean, take that thing down, do the community justice, put a building there that's going to be appropriate. We have multiple functions and uses for a space like that. The Carnegie Building is completely inappropriate for that type of program.
Why do you say that?
It's
completely inappropriate?
completely inappropriate. It's bisected into 4 small spaces with steps up and down everywhere.
And an elevator, though.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but that,
It wouldn't matter if
obviously
that
we're going to fix
elevator
the
was the
elevator.
best elevator in the world. It's not the right space for rec.
Well, actually, if I can jump in, I guess, maybe this is a bit of a loaded question, but, I mean, in a perfect world, what would you have? It sounds to me like you'd have, at least a 20-something thousand square foot gymnasium with indoor recreational facilities, and which, also acts as a community center, which your offices would be, adjacent to or part of. I mean, if you go put the offices over here and the centers over here, I mean, we've got everything all missed. I mean, you can't have a community center or an indoor recreational area at the Head Start building. I mean,
Right.
the Head Start building is not even big enough the three of them to live.
And inappropriate as it may be, they have 4 programs there right now.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is if you can have those programs in a park, that space would be far more utilized. Yes, people are renting it 5 days a week, but they're renting it for a couple hours. And if you put an appropriate space at Crane Park where people can utilize the park as a function of the rec center, I'm not talking about building a 20,000 square foot gymnasium. If we could, great, but there's a certain amount of square footage for the number of people that are going to be using it. That could be a very simple building, relatively inexpensive to build, multifunctional, and provide a lot of use for the community that's not throwing people into this space just to try and make it work. And
What about at Adams Street, next to the library? Don't a lot of the teens go to the library?
Yes.
Adams Street is great, but Crane Park has a skate park, it has fields, it has trees. It's Adams Street is an open-air vineyard space right now that's surrounded by other buildings. In order for Adams Street to function that way, it needs to be developed as an urban park space, and we have one at Crane Park.
Where is the Boys and Girls Club?
It's at St. Helena Elementary School.
That is the Boys and Girls Club.
Boys and
They
Girls
don't
Club,
have their own
yeah.
space.
It's on Tainter Street.
I get
You know
it.
where Carpy Field is?
Yeah, yeah.
The gym, right?
It's that one.
That's
where
where
it is there.
that building,
Right.
yes.
Well, the Head Start building's 1,324 square feet. That would give you, even if the three of you each have your own private office.
The Head Start building is basically unconditioned space. The reason it's used in the summer is because the summer is the only time where it's remotely comfortable to be in the space and
And
use.
it can't be air-conditioned and heated?
I'm not saying it can't be air conditioned and heated, but if we're talking about swing space to make these things happen, yeah, it could probably be a holdover for a little bit, but as a permanent function for Parks and Rec.
Can you define the numbers for us a little bit then? So you're talking, if the Boys and Girls Club has 40 kids that are showing up there, and you guys have at your space, what did you say about it, a half dozen, a dozen?
Less than that.
Less
And
than-
we don't
so you
even
got
have
a
them
couple
now.
coming in.
We don't have them now. We basically phased out of the after-school drop-in teen program.
Right.
It's now directed programming with instructors and there's classes. There's a fee to be paid to participate in these classes.
I'd like to remind everybody of a classic statement that Jeff made, and that was as it related to the teen center, and it said, if it's a restaurant and the food's no good, nobody goes there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you go back to what was happening with the teen center, there was nothing attracting anybody to go there.
Right.
So you can't take the numbers that are happening at the teen center today and saying, oh, well, that's what the teen center is tomorrow. I would also suggest that the teen center, or where you want to attract these kids, needs to be somewhat proximate to the middle school. I mean, you have your, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. They're not going to walk over to Crane Park.
No, but there's school transportation that takes kids everywhere.
You know what? That happened one time. In fact, when they built the primary school, they said they were going to bus all the children to the primary school. That bus lasted for a month. A week.
Mark, you're the active transportation guy. You're telling me I should ride my bicycle to get to City Hall.
I agree.
And yet teens can't
No, what
ride
I'm
their
saying is the kids
bicycle
need
4 or 5 blocks.
I
to
said
a
the
teen
kids
center?
need somewhere to walk to, something proximate to where they will
So we
walk.
build them something at Crane Park.
They're not going to walk from the middle school to Crane Park.
Could I interject real quick, if you don't mind? I'd like to provide some perspective from, this is a department, the Parks and Recreation Department is a department that should be serving all of the residents in the city of St. Helena, not just the teens. And it feels like the conversation is starting to focus on
It has.
teens and a program that has been phased out. So it's no longer the teen center. It is the Recreation Department office. And we have a activity guide. I don't know how many of you have received our electronic version of this. But we're talking about programs that are youth, teens, adults, sports, special interest, drama, fine and performing arts. We've even got an Instagram photo contest that we're promoting in here. It's really all about trying to do the type of things that enhance the quality of life for the residents in the city of St. Helena. And if along the way we bring in visitors, and those visitors come in and they stop and they put gas in their car and they stop at a restaurant, we're happy to be part of having a positive impact on economic development. But really, I would really encourage you to think about not just the teen center itself and what can we do for teens. Right now, there was a duplication of services, and the Boys and Girls Club is providing that service. So why would we want to try and provide a competing service when the Boys and Girls Club's doing just fine, and we can focus on doing other things as a Parks and Recreation Department to not only help people in this community enjoy leisure, enjoy recreation, enjoy access to nature, but to really improve the overall the image, because we should be able to have, as a department, we should be helping the city to provide, to develop that sense of place, that positive image. I can tell you, I've been in communities. I've come from the city of West Sacramento, where we were facility poor. We didn't have a recreation center. We didn't have a community center. We had parks, and we were using school facilities. When we built that recreation center, it became a source of community pride. It was something that people talked about, and we leveraged that to try and encourage people to look at making West Sacramento the type of place to live. And then we built a community center that had a black box theater, a cafe, senior services. It was surrounded by a transit station. It was, these became the type of things that we were really excited to have and build and to manage. And so please think beyond Teen Center, because right now that's a Boys and Girls Club function. We can still do things for teens, but it's going to be within the type of programming that we want to start doing in this, and we want to start growing programming. And if we have the appropriate facilities, like a gymnasium and theater space or auditorium space, we can do so much more for this community.
Just one last question on this, and maybe we can get back to what we were talking about, which is, not to harp on the Carnegie building, but it is across the street from the school that's being used now for the teen center, and they do have an auditorium, and they do have a gymnasium there, and it seems to me that possibly you could get more programming if you combine them all in that same area.
Yeah.
And it's all walking distance from the middle school, the Carnegie building and the elementary school.
Yeah, I don't know how many square feet the Carnegie building is. Is that listed up here?
It is, yeah. It's
5,267 square feet.
Yeah.
You read that?
It's right there.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, it's divided into 4 smaller spaces.
Yeah,
so
it's not an auditorium or anything like
that. Yeah, I mean, the biggest room is the grand room, which if you cut this right here, this is it. Right. And that's not a very big space when you want to do some large programmings or
no,
events.
but then that's why I'm suggesting that I don't know if the school district is amenable, but you do have an auditorium that's quite large, surprisingly large,
at the school,
elementary school, and the gymnasium is surprisingly large across the street.
Which is Boys and Girls Club.
That's right, and the Lyman Park theoretically would be remodeled with the city hall as well, so you'd have a park literally around the corner as well. So it seems like that might be useful in terms of the wonderful programming. It sounds like you're doing some great stuff.
Yeah.
I'd like to just break in for just one little minute. Not that I'm trying to. Right across the street from the Boys and Girls Club is the Catholic school, which you've heard is closing this June.
Right.
They have a fabulous gym. They have a stage, an auditorium in that room. They have another big room by the side of that gymnasium, which is used for meetings and things, and who knows what's going to happen there. But hopefully we all keep an eye out to see what might happen there. So, I mean, there's a gym for you right there that's not going to be used.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
So
we
and parking.
And parking.
Yeah.
So
and all walking distance.
we need to keep that in mind.
I want to come back. I appreciate that. I'm going to change the subject, or really not change the subject, but I want to go back to Doug's proposal because it's a $3 million. We own 3/4 of an acre. Across the chain link fence, the railroad owns at least 1/3 of an acre. It could be more than that. I just went out and walked around on it and tried to do a calculation. Next to that property, headed up toward the railroad station, is a block office building, small, on another chunk of land. One of the things that this town could really use is some thematic stuff that looks like it honors our history. And the railroad has been part of this town's history since 1867. 2 years after the end of the Civil War. And if something could be done to develop that swath of ground from the railroad station all the way down through the property we own, which is estimated to be worth $3 million, and the repair bill that's listed is $400,000, and I think we all agree that that probably is at least double or maybe triple what that is. That's a great deal of money to think about. The second thing is that in all of our planning so far, we've really done nothing to show partnership with our business community. And bringing commuters, or I should say bringing tourists in and finding a place for them to be housed, coupling that with the wine train, which already says it wants to bring workers into town. What a great idea that they'd bring their own workers into the town on a railroad car. It has the benefits of developing some opportunities for our business community, for the programs of the CIA, for the hospital, for various other things, and it would be I think, really an exciting element for our town. Now, is Noble House interested in that? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's ask. But they're not. I don't think they bought the wine train because they want to run trains up and down the Napa Valley. They've already said they want to spend $100 million on hotels. At least that was in that Chronicle article. And where are they going to put it? Rutherford? So Napa, and hopefully, at least in my view, St. Helena. So that's my thought on that.
And that hotel would be walking distance to a cultural center on Adams and a walking distance to one on Lyman. So whichever one it ends up being, if there is one, it would be good for them too.
I have one quick question. We would restrict them from having a restaurant. They could have a coffee shop.
Why would we do that? Why are we talking about that?
I'm making a little joke, Joshua.
That's okay.
Get your sense of humor together.
I have a quick question for Andre. Just real quick, Andre, with your staff, you have 3 staff. I don't know if that staff grows to 4 or 5 or 10 or shrinks to 2, whatever that might be. Does it matter where your office is? For example, if you had a couple offices within City Hall, would that change your ability to serve the public? Joshua had mentioned, hey, if you were at Lyman Park, there's the park, you're the Parks and Rec guy, that's kind of a nice fit, but does it really matter? Could we repurpose the Head Start building for just a useful building to rent out for yoga classes or spin classes or whatever there might be, and you guys are part of the City Hall somewhere? Does that work for you guys, or is it better you're closer to a area?
It's nice to be in close proximity to City Hall. If we were in City Hall, we would definitely make it work. If we were over at Crane Park, we would make that work too.
Which would be better for you, to be closer to City Hall or Crane Park?
I think for the department, it's better for the program staff, the Amalias and Stephanies, to be closer to what they do, the programs that they're running. So if we had a community center, I'd want us to be in the community center. If part of the idea is to be closer to the skate park because we're doing programming out there, that would be good too. Only 3 of us, or 4 or 5. If we can have one central place where we are, that would be best. In West Sacramento, I was in City Hall. I had staff at the community center. I had staff at the rec center. You do what you can, and we made it work, and we'll make this work.
But we're just looking at what's efficient for these different moving pieces in the city, and so and you don't have to answer it now. Maybe come back to us and say, hey, I give this a little thought. Here's what I'm thinking. But my thought is, if your programming that you put out is done via the internet for leagues and things like that, and you could be virtually anywhere, why not incorporate you into an area that we're all going to work on?
Right.
If that's not the case, and it's better for you to be at the park, I'd love to know that, because then we could implement like a multi-purpose thing. So that's my question.
Customer service for us is everything, because we're, I'd be willing to bet we get as many phone calls, if not more, than any other department in the city on a daily basis. Parents calling today, we're getting overwhelmed with calls about bocce ball, about rentals, and fortunately, they're all good calls. People want our service. So if we can be closer to where, where we can serve customers, if it's all about rentals, if it's all about signing up for programs, it would be good to have a presence in a place where the customer can go and do one-stop shopping. They can stop in for that, and they can stop by whatever the department they want to stop by. But then you got to think about things like, if we're going to have a community center, it's probably good that we have staff there. So I think it just depends on what model the city lands on.
I have an idea for the Head Start building, but we're not doing that tonight, so I'm wondering if we can go back to the, if we can't get the trained people to be interested, if they said we have no interest in this at all, what are some other ideas you all have for
Yeah, well, I have
that
to put in
space?
my pitch for workforce housing. It's a good chunk of land. Our town, St. Helena, has drawn a plan that they would like to use. Our town, St. Helena, needs to build, I think it's 8 or 9 more self-help units to complete the grant they got from the U.S. government. So I'm not saying that I think that's a great place for housing. I'm saying I think it needs to be one of the options.
So, if I'm hearing the alternatives so far, it's take the 2 Railroad Avenue properties, and I think everybody's saying move the Park and Rec group, and Andre suggests that we shouldn't be focusing on teen center. So it's the rec department staff that are moving somewhere. We haven't necessarily defined where. I mean, I guess
City Hall, though, for sure.
They now have their biggest room there behind them.
Well,
what I'm hearing.
yeah. So it's where are we moving that to?
Right.
Right. So I mean, everybody, at least what I've heard so far, is everybody's saying what to do with the property, but not what to do with the staff and the programming.
City Hall is the obvious one.
And where's the programming go?
The programming, we were talking about the Carnegie Building for part of it, but the programming that's there now is in the Boys and Girls Club. The other programming isn't happening there anyway, right?
No,
What is the obvious thing to move their offices to where? City Hall?
City Hall, if we're
A new City
I think
Hall.
the obvious thing is Crane Park.
The Head Start.
Can we
but they
just
just
say
said
the
that
obvious
they
thing
want
is
to
to
be
move
where
their
their
offices
programs are.
somewhere?
They're saying put the program.
I have-
There's
Let's say that.
Build a
And then-
building.
Yes, build a new. We're saying, Joshua and I are both saying. I don't know about Pat. Pat, I think was saying use the same building that's there now and make that work. Joshua and I were saying no, build a new building for them that's their offices plus what the community needs, which is this other space.
So like a gymnasium, sort of
Gymnasium.
community
Not a
center,
I think it's just
programming
it's
space?
a room. It's
Couple
more.
thousand square
Can-
foot, 3,000
Can we
square foot.
can we talk about that when we get to the Head Start building, and maybe
Yeah.
right now we
Yeah,
can
why
say,
don't we, yeah, that's probably.
can we simply say Parks and Rec, they need offices somewhere. Railroad is
I
not
think
the
that's
most
a good-
appropriate
good
place.
approach.
Yes.
Can we say that we're all in agreement that we don't think there's a civic function that's going to be appropriate for the Railroad Avenue spaces, other than the option of perhaps housing, or perhaps we lease or sell it
Yeah,
to get some
that's-
revenue?
I was
Get
going to add
revenue.
selling
Can you write that
it, yeah.
down and go to the next
Let's
thing?
do it.
Okay.
Well,
That's everything tonight.
I have to put my 2 cents in it before you.
Yeah.
First of all, we don't really, I don't think we have enough information to understand the dynamics of putting a hotel there on the teen center lot. First of all, the railroad just can't stop and let people off. It's a restaurant on rails. It just goes up and down. And in order to build a hotel, the whole train program would have to change and become under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation in California. That's a can of worms for those people. So there has to be a real upside for them to do that, because basically, when the train stops, the same people have to get back on the train and go down. If it becomes a real commuter train, it changes the whole dynamics of the wine train. So we don't really know what that real future is. And again, I hate speculating on assumptions that we think that, they're going to like this lot, they're going to build a hotel, they're going to want it. We don't really know. And we don't really know the dynamics of trying to, what kind of a hotel would go on this small land? And there's not a lot of land here. I mean, hotels need restaurants, they need a lot of other facilities and parking, and They have huge demands. I mean, look at Las Escobas. I mean, they just
If I can, I don't,
they just jammed it. Wait, Mark, please. I know you're the chair, but I'm not sure what it means to be the chair. Sometimes I feel like, the chair is not, somebody that kind of gets people within the agenda, but, don't cut me off and be the last statement for me. I appreciate that. But so I'm just saying that I don't think we can just keep speculating all these possibilities with the teen center, with the hotel and the railroad. We need some help in this. Is there really a demand for this? Could they really build a hotel there? What would it look like? My feelings with anything that's being done in this town from here on out, there should be a model build of every little thing so we can see what they're going to build. I just don't think it's good to end up with another Las Escobas hotel. So whatever we do in Adams, whatever we do at Lyman Park or the Railroad Center, I think we need to build models so we all agree that this is within the vernacular of what we want. And so my feeling with the teen center is, this is a radical idea, but I would rather just land bank it for the future and just make it a parking lot, because the city has no major parking lot. There's the merchants downtown, they're all parking on Main Street. And if there was an incentive to get them off Main Street and go, it's not that far of a walk, to free up Main Street so people can park there. Because what happens with the traffic is, it's so hard to park on Main Street. You hold up traffic going back and forth, just trying to get into a little slot. And there's also a frustration where I've had clients come to see me, and they said, we couldn't park, so we gave up. We'll see you another day. So when you talk about, trying to come up with some kind of a partnership with businesses to help support them, sometimes you have to look at all the bigger picture, which is these cars. We have so many of these cars that got to go somewhere. And so, and not only that, but, the city's been taking money from all these merchants, for their use permit with parking in lieu fees. And yet, no parking lot has ever been built, if I stand to be corrected by that. Huh?
Right.
And I don't know how much money is in that account, but for me, I like the idea of a parking lot over there because it serves two purposes. It has a real important functionality purpose, and two, it land banks for the future in case, in the future, we really understand what our needs are, because I hate selling anything unless I know I'm going to get a really big, long return on it. And then just getting back to, I just want to say one thing about Adams, and that is I don't want to be put in this camp like I'm there to support some big hotel complex. That is not in my agenda. But I do like the idea of freezing that, because that's a very complicated project. We have some in the group here that want to load it up with all kinds of civic functions. We have another group here that says keep it open as an open space. So you see, there is no one majority here. So that's why I say, just leave it off the table. That's a whole other agenda for another time.
Can we hold that definitely for another time? So let me just check in here on the Teen Center and CDF and make sure that there aren't ideas that we haven't captured.
Yeah, we need to keep it for swing space in the interim until other things are figured out.
And the thing with parking is you make it metered parking, and once you get it built, it's just nothing but profit and profit and profit and profit. I like the idea of approaching the company that runs the wine train and see if they think the space is big enough for a hotel. I like that idea. It's an option. I think a parking structure is an option. I think housing is an option. And I think that's about it.
Where I was going to go earlier was I don't think it's our place as the SHAPE committee to be suggesting what goes on the property that we're suggesting should be sold.
I agree.
I mean, there's all this speculation as what should be put there or might be put there or what should be. I think our mandate is to say, here's what we think about those properties. We think we should abandon what's there, and we think it should be put up for sale or not. or leased, depending on what those and we should move those functions somewhere else. I think that's what we're saying here. We're not saying it's a restaurant or a hotel or a parking lot or whatever it is. That's not, because who knows what's going to happen. We're just looking at the appraised values and saying, okay, when we put this whole model together with all the ideas that we've come up with, potentially, if we're to sell it, we maybe have $3.2 million that we end up putting in the cash flow of the long-range financial forecast, or if we're going to lease it, it would generate X, which is maybe 5% probably on a ground lease. So, I mean, that's what we would end up putting in a couple of alternative models. So it's, I just want to say, so I think the alternatives are, I think we're saying, take those functions, move them somewhere else. As Joshua said earlier, we don't know where, and either sell it or lease it.
Well, I think though Oliver's, I think we can say Oliver's idea. I mean, you're right. The merchants downtown are paying a parking in lieu fee.
And so that's another alternative. Move their function somewhere else and retain it as a parking lot.
But I think we're trying to come up with a rationalization of why we want to land bank it, lease it, sell it. There has to be some end game to give us the pretext of why we made that decision. So I know we don't want to get into the minutiae, should there be a little coffee shop there or things like that. I understand that, but it's actually okay to be a little bit flexible and think of these things. But I think if we look at, when we talk about assets planning engagement, how can you not think about what the end game could possibly be to help support why you're making the decision to sell it or lease it or bulldoze it or redo it? There has to be some vision at the end of the line, and I don't want to be cut off from the vision because I think that's helps sell the means.
I'm with you. I think you really have to think about that. I agree exactly what you're saying is the case, but we might be able to get a lot more than $3.5 million into the specific case of the train situation, so it deserves
well, we're going to talk to Cosmont.
Right.
And
well,
we're going to throw it up there.
City government may want to talk to the trains and leave Cosmont out unless they're the guys who are hired to do it. I don't know, but one way or another, we should think of that specific purpose, a parking lot, and see if it makes some sense.
But that is the end game, Oliver. The end game is we have all these ideas of all these things we want to do. We want to build a new city hall. We want to build a cultural center. We want to maybe build a gymnasium. I mean, all these things that everybody's coming up with that they want to do because that's what we've heard, generally speaking, from city, and we've heard from ourselves. And so the end game is, how do you pay for that? And part of the end game is you sell this, or maybe you use ground lease monies to support a borrowing base or whatever. So that is what the end game is. That's what we're talking about as far as, maybe we lease it, maybe we sell it. You could say, let's leave it as a parking lot and have no revenue at all off of it, but I don't know if that ends up helping support the end game.
Right. I have just a couple comments. First of all, we have a lot of buildings that are potentially in flux, City Hall especially, right? So if we keep the CDF and Teen Center for the option to house office workers while we're rebuilding something or knocking something down, I think that's a smart thing to do. I think holding on to that for the near term, at least, the next 5 or 10 years makes sense, because what we have are existing buildings that if we're not using them, we can lease them out and get money just from the office use. There are not a lot of small offices in town. If you're a one-person office and you want to rent a 300 or 400 square foot space in this town, good luck, right? There just aren't many. The CDF building happens to be set up with just a dozen of those buildings all strung together, and you could fill that up, I think, in pretty short order, and have some income off it. I don't think the parking really works. Right now, the parking next to that building is part of the building located at 1050 Adams, down at the corner of Railroad and Adams, near Safeway and La Prima. And the people who are in that building, I have that building for sale as a broker, and I can tell you the parking up by the CDF building is not very attractive for somebody who even wants to walk back down the street to 1050 Adams at the corner of Railroad and Adams. So I find it very unlikely that anybody's going to park up there and walk downtown. I think we keep the buildings, we use them while we need them, then we rent them out, and then in 10 years or whatever that might be, if there's more clarity, we can make a decision at that time. But I don't think putting a Noble House with their hotel there is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's something to consider, but right now we own it, we have it, and we're going to need it. So I don't think it's good to cast it away.
Stan, we haven't heard from you at
Yeah,
all
Stan.
tonight.
Well, wait, I just wanted, so your idea is do nothing.
No, my idea is to use it.
Right, but I mean, it says don't,
Yeah, we don't have to kick that can yet.
okay.
Some renovation that would have.
Potentially, but I mean, I think that there's some tolerable workspace in there that, I mean, maybe not so much at the teen center, but the CDF building, it's a little light in its construction, but it's utilitarian.
You know, it's all used right now.
Right, no, precisely. Right.
Right, so I mean, you couldn't rent it out.
No, but
you're using it.
But once we
We're
build
using
a
it.
new city hall or something like that.
But how are you going
and
to pay for City Hall?
Well, I think what we're talking about is this specific building. I don't think it's incumbent upon the use of this exact property to drive the economic mechanisms for every decision we're making. I think that this is an existing building. It's being used right now by us. We may find it to serve us better in the future by continuing to use it, and then at an appropriate time when we don't need it or there's no need for it or we're not getting income, then we can do something else with it.
Okay.
On the Railroad Avenue properties, believe it or not, I've given a lot of thought to those two properties over there. Within the context of an overarching interest in mitigating cost savings and what all this is going to cost, and also in terms of a migration strategy where they're going to be moving pieces. For example, if the City Hall is torn down and rebuilt, the administration needs to go somewhere. I wrote down on one piece of paper my ideas for the Railroad Avenue properties. I don't know if I'd be allowed to pass that around and share it, but it'd be easier if I could.
Well, for the good of the public, why don't you, tell us what your
Okay,
ideas
yeah,
are.
I'll pass these out. I didn't make enough copies for the public, but
I'll make copies.
part of this is predicated on the idea of Parks and Rec moving to Crane Park and some economical building being added out there at Crane Park. So I think Parks and Rec offices should be in Crane Park, but there should be some enhancement to the Crane Park space that we could talk about later. Perhaps a modular building or a steel structure of some kind, but something economical. But I think Parks and Rec should vacate the teen what's now the teen center. I think that the properties on Railroad Avenue could be a proposed use would be a transitional space for city offices during City Hall construction, maybe for about 2 years, and it could possibly also become a permanent location for example, the planning department or maybe Department of Public Works offices. And there I'm thinking about at the current teen center building, possibly planning, could stay in that location. But I think the benefits of really taking a look at those properties on Railroad would be, wrote down here for the public to hear, expeditious transition space for facilities migration and construction plans. It uses city-owned facilities during the City Hall construction, and this proposal would upgrade and extend the useful life of existing city assets, those two buildings. That would give us some equity growth, and it would produce revenue from future tenants, as Jeff was saying, in the 1572 building. So my thought there was to remodel both buildings, the interiors, renovate the exteriors and the landscape. 1572 needs new windows and new siding, and then try to embellish the exterior so that the two buildings tie together visually a little bit. Perhaps some kind of railroad theme, so that from the street there's more curb appeal, and the two buildings look like they belong to the same establishment. And then also see if we can add some spaces to the rear parking, renovate the rear parking area. And then I go into some proposals for both buildings, and I was taking a look at the square footage that the different departments in the city currently use and will need, and where those could be dropped into those two buildings. And probably don't need to go into it in detail here, but I think that the former CDF building would be a good temporary space over, say, a transition period for the city administration and also for the finance department. And then I've got some details on offices and cubicles and other spaces that would be needed in that building. And then in the former teen center building on the corner, again, predicated on the Parks and Rec moving to Crane Park, the users in that corner building could be the planning and building department and some or all of the public works offices. If there's not enough room in that corner building, I think there's ample room in the former CDF building for some more offices. But also the planning department records, if possible, they might be able to use the building number 2 behind the teen center, subject to taking a look at the flood issues there. But in the end, I think those properties would be a way to somewhat economically give us some transition square footage while a city hall is being torn down and rebuilt, hypothetically, retain ownership of the properties, fix them up while we're at it, and then once the administration and the public offices can relocate, then those spaces could be rented out, as Jeff was saying. So I just think in terms of the migration plan and also some cost savings, that we might be able to spruce up those two buildings and take advantage of that space and keep them for future use, but they might be a good pivot point for us to take advantage of as part of the migration while City Hall hypothetically is torn down and rebuilt.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. Okay.
That was a conversation stopper.
So I think we have that retained for short-term use with, the details of it fleshed out more. Is there anything that has not been offered for the Railroad Avenue properties, either one of them or both of them, that you want to make sure gets put up there as part of the options?
I mean, all that explanation was summarized in retained for short-term use. I guess I'm not very succinct.
You just did a really nice job of fleshing it out.
Do you want to describe it a different way, Stan?
No, it's retained for short-term use.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then you also said that we'd keep it for an office space that we'd lease later, so it would be an asset to the city that was generating income.
Yeah, we would hang on to it.
Okay.
Did you have any numbers or anything associated with like remodel costs and that sort of thing?
Not yet, but just looking at the buildings, I think that it's within reasonable scope. I think they're structurally very good. Windows and siding on the CDF building.
Well, that's in the AMG report, but I think you were talking about internally remodeling it and adding offices and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think much needs to be done to the interior. The CDF building, it's got offices on one wing, and then sort of open space on the left-hand wing that I would visualize could be a cubicle environment.
Okay.
Yeah, but
All right.
I don't have those particulars.
Okay.
So the other thing we have is Tim Neiman's written comments for each one of these. And I'm not sure if we want to put them on there. Some of them are. So if we look at the teen center, he's got leased the site to third party for other use with new construction. That's actually not on there. Is it? Leasing the site to a third party for other use with new construction. That was your possibly wine train or something else. Rehab, maintain both properties, uses the teen center, lease the CDF for or use for city administrative purposes. Is that covered? and then build new city hall on that site.
No, I don't think that was covered.
That one's not on there at all.
Have rehab and continue to use as a teen center. We don't have that up there anymore.
But yeah, and he wasn't here to hear that the teen center's going away, so.
Do whatever E&G said we should do.
Yeah.
Well, that would be for the Parks and Rec, so it's not just the teen center, right?
I think his new idea is the city hall, right? That's the one that we have.
That's the one that we haven't seen,
and I
is build a city hall on that
Wow.
property.
So do you want to carry that one forward?
Yeah.
Build new city hall on the site. You got it. Great. I don't think we have the one where it's rehabbing it. Rehab and maintain both properties.
That's kind of Stan's idea, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, his idea is to leave it as is. The current use is not have City Hall go into it. Stan's idea is to have it be redone for City Hall to move into it.
Temporarily, while we
Right.
build a new one,
Yeah.
and then lease it as office space after
But
that.
Stan's idea still puts out the program that's there, the people out. Tim's keeps it, and we just fix it up.
Yeah.
So I see a difference.
Since Stan spent all that time writing that, I just thought I'd discuss it for a minute. I wonder about the wisdom of spending the money. We do have prices in here to rehab those buildings. If we would be able to get the money back, Jeff would be the one to maybe know about this in future revenue by renting it. And I'm thinking in my mind of comparing that to if indeed the Catholic school closes. It's a very large building, and it's probably the church is going to be anxious to make some income from it. And I could see all the city hall functions moving to the Catholic school without maybe an awful lot of rehab at all. Now you'd be paying rent, so you'd have to have a comparison of whether or not rehabbing it would pay enough money in revenue by renting it out as office space compared to renting out like the Catholic school building. It's just a thought.
Well, one of the ideas, or one of the justifications, I guess, behind rehabbing the Railroad Avenue properties is that it extends the useful life of those buildings and increases their equity, the asset value there. After, hypothetically, we vacated those spaces, they would be worth that much more. I think you would recover a lot of the costs, if not all, of the rehab of those buildings down the line.
Jeff, what do you think about that? I mean, if we rehab the CDF and the teen center buildings, would we? I mean, and then we
I don't
ended
know
up
what the
selling
numbers
it.
are. I mean, I think you can go to a different level, right? I mean, if you took it to its, put a whole bunch of money into it and then got a little bit of rent, that makes no sense. But if you can put a little bit of money into it, sustain it for a longer period of time, and keep a decent income stream, then it makes sense. It just depends.
But
what
if you were
level
to sell it, would you get the money back from your rehab?
Probably not, because whoever comes in there probably won't want those buildings in their way.
Tear them down.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
I just have to kind of wonder if we're thinking 40 years out, if those buildings built in the 70s, I think probably, these are not architecturally wonderful for the city, if it's worth making an investment in them for the temporary use for a transition period, and then try to hang on to them. I don't know. We'd have to think about that, I think.
I'm not sure where the city functions would go during reconstruction of a city hall.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to make a major investment
Could be part of the
in
negotiations
those
for the
properties,
state
certainly,
train
but fix them up enough
2
to where they could suffice as a
Start building after
transitional space.
Well, if City Hall is, excuse me, if City Hall gets moved by buying a building, that can be renovated while City Hall stays in place. So there is no need then for a transitional spot.
it could be that there's an opportunity with, if in fact the trained people were interested, or somebody else was interested, but the trained people particularly, that you could make that part of the negotiation, that over the first 2 years we have it for City Hall transitional period, and then their ownership of it takes place after that, but there's some upfront money, so we know the money's coming in against a bond issue or something. It seems to me that all could be worked out. That's a logistical thing.
Yeah, either way, we need to think about the migration of offices while hypothetically City Hall is torn down and rebuilt. It could be a commercial lease of an existing property, or used properties we own. A couple different options, certainly.
That's what I mentioned.
I think Marsh Presswich gets to deal with that one.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
No, honestly, I think that's a city council, city manager issue as to how they're going to deal with any transition that ends up coming along, whether they find a place to rent or they bring in trailers or whatever they do. I don't think it's our job to try and figure out what the logistics would be of
the movement.
Yeah.
So let me just check through the rest of Tim's to make sure we've got them. I think we have most of them. So the teen and CDF is done. The fire station, he has maintain as a fire station. We have that up there. And maintain as a fire station plus police department, which we also have. So those are covered. The library, rehab and maintain as a library, we have. Rehab, maintain as library plus add designated community spaces. We have that in repurposing and adjusting. Repurpose as City Hall and police, move library to Carnegie or build new library. I think we have that in some configuration. Would that be accurate? Yeah. Repurpose as City Hall in 10,000 square feet of the space, put library in the rest of the space, build new annex for police at fire station, utilize any extra space in fire station to save build costs. I think we have that. Didn't we have a repurposing it as a City Hall? Yeah.
Well, I think this one's different because it's bringing them both under the same roof, which I think.
Okay. Should we add that then? Repurpose as a City Hall and library combo.
Oof.
And then the last one is repurpose as City Hall only, move library to Carnegie or build a new library, build new annex for police at fire station, utilize any extra space in fire station to save build cost. We have that as a combination in some of these, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah?
He does too within his notes. Kind of.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not missing anything.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some history, maybe Mark, about how the fire station was built, or Suzanne, somebody who's been around for a while. I'm not sure, but what they don't feel pretty territorial about that space.
That's an understatement.
The funding for the fire station came from a general obligation bond, which essentially is a property tax on only owners. And so some communities that confront challenges like this want to spread the burden, the financial burden, to as many people as possible so that you take pressure off of any one individual group. In this case, the community was very generous and over 20 years through property tax built the fire station via general obligation bond, and we know that that's paid off now.
Thank you.
Put it in the can.
So we will write these up for you and get them out to you. Is there anything else that you want to say about either these properties or the process tonight? So now you've had we did it in two groups and you've had it as a whole group. Is there any preferences, any disappointments?
I think this worked very well.
I did like the whole group session. Yeah, I liked it.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me whether it's a small group or a big group. I just want to say that every time, now twice, we've gone through this, I've always come in with one set of thoughts, and I've gone out with a better set of thoughts. So I really appreciate the comments that everybody has made, and I've profited by it, and I want to thank you.
You're here.
Yeah, I think it's great. I like hearing firsthand what each person wants to say. I think the difficulty is going to come at the end of talking about all the buildings, and we're going to have to pare back these alternatives. So, as we got information on City Hall, right, emailed to us, we're going to get information on these. Everybody should be thinking a little bit about, well, what really are their top one or two? Because we're going to have to try and pull this all together in a one or two or three alternatives, and we can't have five of every. I mean, we'd end up with Tim's not here, but Tim would know best what the matrix would be that would be developed. It would be unwieldy. So we are going to have to pare back the alternatives and sort of focus on one or at most two of each of these things.
It does seem that what Stan did is really useful, and that if you presented an idea that's your own, then you might want to write up a page so that it could be presented in a way that's a page, and then maybe we then use our criteria finally after we've gone through the buildings and say, does that serve the community? Yeah. Does this keep the small town? Yeah. And then we can see which ones of those rise to the top. But it's hard when it's just one line, because you don't really have a fleshed out idea. So if you've presented it, it's probably a good idea to put a page together for whatever your ideas are.
So the invitation was that you would use the criteria as you brought your ideas forward and hopefully speak to them, but it's absolutely something that will be used as you move to the next phase. But I'm thinking that it's public comment on your process and these buildings, right?
Are there any public comments on what we all just talked about? Oh, good. Peter.
He's a good.
I thought you called it.
And sit here to say nothing.
Yeah, because that's a long.
No, I'm just making. First or only second or third meeting I've attended, and I just want to comment as a citizen. Peter Scott, by the way, St. Helena. I just want to comment and thank you everybody here for being part of this committee and giving up your Wednesday evenings and all kinds of other times in between to do this. It's really appreciated, at least by me. I think this is really valuable stuff and not easy. Spirited debates, but there's some really smart people in this room. And Mark's holding his own as well, so that's good.
I don't know that anybody else on the committee appreciates that, but that's okay.
So anyhow, I just want to say thank you and good luck, and thanks for taking on the heavy lifting on behalf of the community.
Great, thanks.
Wow, that's so nice.
That is nice, and it's actually in reverse. It's so nice to see more people coming, and it would be great if this room was filled, because there are a lot of ideas out there. It'd be nice to hear what people are saying out there too. Esther.
Start, stage, and screen.
Well, I just wanted to mention my ideas. I like Doug's idea of the City Hall being by Lyman Parking, using that facility right in the center of town there. I just think that City Hall should be pretty impressive and representative of our fine community. Oh, my name is Esther Ackersluiten. I live at Woodbridge in St. Helena, as an aside. So I was thinking about using the facilities of Carnegie Building, perhaps in the construction of City Hall. We need to have a City Hall that really works for our employees, and they should have a fine working community area. Why not? You get better employees, better work, the whole thing gets better. So we need something really good for our City Hall and our employees, and for our community. So my feeling is just have a nice, lovely, impressive City Hall and have it brand new, perfectly functional. And we can use perhaps Carnegie Building in the meantime while it's under construction, if that's a possibility. I think all your fine ideas are really great, and I think it's a wonderful thing that you guys are doing, and I thank you very, very much. My applaud.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Anybody else? Tom? No? Everybody's? All right, meeting adjourned.
Oh, wait.
Oh, we got to talk about next week? Which buildings? Damn.
So first of
I
all,
thought this was going to be over at 8 o'clock today, but...
And the bowling alley.
And the bowling alley.
so next week you should have the title reports, the final 2 properties, that information. We will have the summary of and the data from the focus groups also available to you, that it should go out with the agenda on Friday. And then the other properties, what you have left are Carnegie, the Public Corporation Yard, Scouts, Signorelli, Head Start, Lyman, and then Adams. So what if you tried to get everything next week except for Adams, and then went Adams the following week, just because it kind of ties up?
I have a suggestion. This comes from my wife, so I have to share it. What we're seeing is that we have very low public turnout. Adams Street is going to be really important, and if we can get the agenda for 2 weeks out into the newspaper, I think we'll have a chance of having a little better crowd, and then people will actually know what we're going to be talking about. So my suggestion would be then that we publish 2 agendas and make sure that second week gets published in the newspaper. So that's my wife's suggestion. I fully endorse it.
So let me just check. The other thing I forgot to say that happens next week is Cosmont comes in with some of their recommendations. Yes, next week.
Boy, that's a lot for one night.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking you.
What are they going to be able to recommend at this point?
The direction that they're working with right now is they have feedback. They've received the list from the prior week, so they know the various options related to City Hall, which is a centerpiece of these discussions. And we were going to share what happened tonight with them tomorrow and give them a starting point to begin building a matrix for each of the various options, and to start discussing various financing strategies. So some of the big ticket items were discussed at the prior meeting. So we, for purposes of math, we're going to make an assumption that if there was a cultural amenity building, something like that, whether you define it as a cultural center or a community center or something like that, we assume 20,000 square feet for math purposes. We know what the numbers are for City Hall brand new. We are looking at leasing costs in town if there was a lease option. And so we think that we're anticipating a matrix that will be built as a starting point for some of your conversations, and you're really filling in the details on that. So the plan, because they're flying up from Southern California, those tickets are bought. The plan is to try to get through as many of the buildings as possible, but also spend enough time with them to chew out some of the ideas on financing or funding related to the ambition of some of these buildings, as well as the costs associated with the EMG study. But you're going to want to try to use them as much as you can to flesh out some of the ideas. I think you spent literally probably less than 10 minutes on that first building today. Hearing some of the conversation on these other assets, they may fall into that same box. You may get through some of them a little quicker. Others, I know, will take a little longer. But the plan perhaps would be up to an hour and a half on buildings, up to an hour with Cosmont, as sort of a balance.
Can we have them go first?
I think that would be fine. And
that's a great idea.
Because they're not going to have prepared any of the ideas related to what comes forward with the additional buildings, but they can come back, and really I see them being available by telephone as consulting various questions that come out of discussions over the course of the next month. And so they're not going away, they're still available and will be available. It's just that you're starting to refine the various options here.
How many times are we interfacing with them, or how many times are they coming here?
There's a plan for 3.
Three.
But we have flexibility to work with them beyond that.
3, okay.
May I ask a question? Parking has come up several times, and I never thought when I started on this committee I'd be this obsessed with parking, but I am. I mentioned something to you, and I've never heard back from you. And also, I would like to know what's going on with the PG&E lot, and I'm wondering if you can report to us on those 2 things at some point.
I can actually give you a 2-minute update real quick.
Okay.
So there was a triangular parcel on Church Street that we talked about that at one point I guess was discussed as a possible parking garage, and I followed up and contacted the individual that we talked about and learned a little bit more about the project and said we'd look for files related to that. But that conversation inspired some thinking on my own related to a larger triangle that's perhaps even better located. And so I'm thinking about another option related to parking that could be interesting for the town. The PG&E parking lot, the city's had some very recent conversations with representatives of PG&E. We've asked for the opportunity to turn that surface lot into a pilot parking project for now as a interim use. So I understand a year or 2 ago that was made available for parking, then the fence went up. What we're asking for is the fence to come down and to be able to use it for parking in the interim. The City Council's expressed an interest in acquiring that parcel for parking, and so we're in conversations right now with PG&E about how that might happen.
Good. So, Mark, as far as COSMAC goes, I mean, they're going to have some, I guess, relatively vague. I mean, it's not going to be nailed down in any way, shape, or form, but I think the one thing they will give us is a lot of different ideas as to how you may structure some of these buildings, what from a public-private partnership or bonding or sales tax, or how you may end up paying for some of these things. And they're at least going to have, as you said, the 2 big ticket items. But so we'll conceptually probably learn about various avenues and ways we can go about financing this and what our general financial situation allows us from a borrowing-based standpoint as well, right?
That's correct, because they're also informed by the long-range financial forecast and looking at the modeling that's come out of that particular exercise. So they're informed by the EMG study, the updated numbers, the long-range financial forecast, your vision for some of these parcels, and we'll begin to help put together a matrix of ideas and options for you to consider.
Okay, thanks. Are we going to try and bite off all these buildings tomorrow? I mean, or next week? Sorry. Unless everybody wants to meet tomorrow. I got time. So.
I don't think it's going to happen, but we should get a good start at it.
Yeah, I think with COSMOT and just the general way that we, I think really fully flesh out the ideas on all of them, I don't think we can get there. I do agree that if we're going to talk about Adam Street, we need to give people enough notice that we're going to talk about Adam Street. And on the Adam Street situation, when Adam Street ends up on the agenda, I would encourage everybody to really thoroughly read the 2009 Adam Street visioning statement. I'm not sure that everybody has done that or refreshed their memory of it. And some of the other information that we receive from the workshops and whatnot. So I think that is important that we all come fully prepared with that information when we throw out our ideas on it. But I think we can probably get through these with COSMOT in the next 2 weeks. But I don't see us getting to Adam Street until the 3rd week.
Well, there's 3 that shouldn't take very long.
So if my question and suggestion to you is, there was a number of things that you talked about tonight that you repeated from last week. and that also cover some of the buildings. So, for example, the Head Start building. I don't know how much new you'd really want to add to that. Signorelli Barn is the new one, but there aren't nearly as many options with that one as there are with a lot of these others. You've got the Public Works Corporation yard. What's not up here is Lyman Park, but you've talked about that.
That's covered.
Right. So I think it actually might be possible. Scout Hall is one of the biggies, maybe, and Carnegie, more on Carnegie. But the rest of them you really have talked a lot about, unless there's something new. And if maybe you could decide that only new things about these particular properties would be presented, and you'll have the recommendation. So if we've missed something, we can certainly add it in. But then it is quite possible to get those done. And if you really want to look at Adams Street a couple of weeks out, you'd want to send it out right away for the 4th, and you could put any remaining buildings either on the next week.
I think you said 3 weeks out. You're saying 2 weeks out.
Right.
I think
If
3
you
weeks
can get these
maybe
done.
makes more sense because that'll give us a chance to actually solidify some of these ideas.
I'm
before we go.
I'm really, I mean, and Joshua and I are, I think, in violent agreement on this one. I'm concerned that there's going to be discussion. I mean, we're going to rediscuss issues that we've thought of today. You know, these, and again, as many people have mentioned, I mean, this stuff all fits together. This is a big Rubik's Cube. And so as we get closer to the end and we start talking about the last items that are here before we talk to Adams Street, I would hate to put something out there to the public and say, hey, we're going to talk about Adams Street on April whatever, and then we're not there. So I would rather see what happens next week, and then maybe the public only gets a 1-week notice on Adams Street. I mean, I would love to give them a 2-week notice, but I'm just a little bit suspect that we get there. Maybe we'll be surprised and we'll get through it.
I'll share your thoughts with my wife. No, I concur with it. I think that's fine. I think we've got to be ready for Adams.
Yeah, and we might want to have a preliminary discussion ourselves before we just say, I've got an idea.
We don't want to be punting.
Just to make sure that we narrow it down a little bit.
So let's just, next week's agenda is Cosmont, and we're going to get through as many of these as possible, and maybe we'll surprise ourselves.
And then we'll give you the focus group information. So then you'd use the
So we'll have that
4th
too.
to bring stuff together and prepare for the 11th, which would be, I think, the following Wednesday that you would deal with Adams Street. Does that sound right?
Can I just ask you, is the intention to, at some point, kind of put together, here's scenario 1, where we have the new City Hall at Lyman, and then we have, this is what we do with the library, this is what we do with all 10 properties. Scenario 2 is 10 properties, scenario 3 is 10 properties, however many scenarios there are, they incorporate all of those, and then we decide how they inform Adams Street?
It's a great question, and I've rattled this one around in my own head, and if anybody else has any other ideas, I'd love to hear them. But I think at the end, once we get through all these buildings, I don't know, it's like we kind of got to go through all the alternatives that are listed and say, okay, look, what are the top 2?
Right.
I mean, I know there's some great ideas on all of these, but what are the top 2? And because we have to narrow this thing down and only build some models that relate to, there can only be 2 or 3 models.
Yeah, and it seems maybe we do some homework after we've got everybody's ideas into the one-liners, and we take those home and come back with, I put that one with that one, and that one, and that one, and that one, and this is a pretty good plan. And then present those plans as options and try to narrow down the ones that aren't totally overlapping.
Yeah, so again, maybe we'll even need part of the 4th of April to even sort of solidify that before we even talk about Adams Street. I mean, so we'll certainly use the time.
Yeah, I think so.
But what's going to happen with the financial component, it's going to flush out what's the priority in the end.
And
Sure
is there any way in the world that we could have a closed session so we can really, talk together without being on TV or having anybody here?
This isn't Washington, D.C. We don't do that here.
Hey.
We do everything in the public. No, I mean, I think how we did it tonight, I mean, we're going to flush it out. We're going to end up having, it's going to be a little bit messy and muddy, but, I mean, that's how it's got to, everybody's got to hear what we have to say.
Yeah, I think it's good.
I want to point out a little bit of factual information. It's not actually 8:20 as that clock reads.
9:10.
It's 9:10. If the school could fix that clock, I'd really appreciate it. I missed an appointment last week.
Oh, you thought we were getting done early?
No, not this week. Last week.
Can I ask a question, Mark? I don't know if everybody's seen the alternative yard, since we're going to potentially be talking about the yard next time, and where that road is and what that all looks like. Is there a way to have a chance to visit that during this next week, a time that we can ride over there and look at it? The new corporation yard, potential place that we could put it, where it could go from where it is now if we moved it. You don't know? That's why I'm asking Mark if we could take a tour. It's over by the wastewater.
You're talking about the wastewater.
Yeah.
location.
And there's a road that needs to be repaired there. Not repaired, but it's a dirt road and it's only one lane, so that would have to be rebuilt.
It's not a
to
dirt
make this
road.
work.
It's a paved road.
Oh, it's paved? Oh, well, then it's
a paved road. Is it Jack's Lane?
Yeah, Shack's Lane.
Shack's Lane, yeah, that's
Shack's
right.
Lane. So
Shack's Lane.
It's paved.
you can drive out there. There's no gate. You can drive out there yourself and just look at the space.
And nobody cares if we just go out there? It's fine.
And there's a wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
This community owns it. There's a little space on the right where we have a few cars that are used by the fire department for training. And there's a lot of space there. And there's additional space beyond that. And so there is a potential concept of being able to fit it onto that space.
It's not that, isn't there sort of like a flood space where it's an overflow space, or where they used to put the water, that wastewater go out
We
into
have a
that
number
field?
of ponds. in
You're talking
the
about the spray field.
The spray field.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's not what we're talking about.
No,
obviously.
we're not, and
so
that's-
the area
that's-
you're talking about is parking now and near the
It's
fire
just
thing?
basically a dirt lot, and
Yeah, it's gravel.
Okay.
There's a decent amount of space there.
And it flooded in 2005 or 6 or something, so
It's not in the floodplain. It's not mapped into the floodplain, but we
it
do
floods.
have a report that it had a decent amount of water. I don't know the scale of the water or flooding that may have
It's like
occurred.
the current one. Was it as bad as the current one?
I don't think so. No.
So the corporation yard's not moving to Adams Street, so that's off the table.
No, it's moving to Lyman Park. It's moving to Lyman Park, the back end of it.
Next to the cultural center.
Sorry. If there's interest in an organized tour, we can. If I have a raise of hands, I can try to coordinate a time that our staff would be available.
Well, I'll go if you're going to do a time, and then they can point at the specific area so that we're not on different pages.
Okay.
No, I'll go. Well, here's 3 of us. We'll go.
I can only have up to 5 of you at a time generally on this
That's all
particular
you can
subject
take?
matter. So we'd have to do 2 if more than 5 of you wanted to attend. But would Monday or Friday work better?
Friday's good for me. Good for you, Pat?
This week? Okay.
Let's do Friday.
Let's
What
say-
time Friday?
Let's say 1 o'clock Friday. I'm not checking my calendar, but I'll work
Not
with
me.
our staff to a little later. How about 2 p.m. Friday?
2 o'clock.
Calendar, man.
2 o'clock Friday.
I'll be volunteering some other staff probably.
I could send out a notice once we
Okay,
or reach
we'll work
out.
with the city clerk.
Here we
and,
go.
And we'll need to take RSVPs on this because we need to limit it to 5 people for visit, right? And maybe do 2 tours. Okay.
We've only got 3.
You're not going to. You don't want to see the wastewater?
I'll call you.
The wastewater. Oh, God, those kids would love that wastewater.
Okay. Any other business?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Second.